the Industrial Revolution of the Mage Lord. Greetings, fellow multiversal adventurers. It's an honor to have you back in this saga that has us all hooked. Official channel statement: this story is 100% epic fiction. So please don't attempt real magic, the results aren't guaranteed and insurance won't cover it. The rights to this masterpiece belong entirely to its brilliant original author. We are just a barge sharing it with you. Do you want to keep being part of this amazing community? Join our ninja army of subscribers on YouTube and give this content a like. And for true fans, our Patreon has exclusive ninjutsu waiting for you. Chapter 376: Magical Mutation. By the time Harvey received the news and arrived at the outpost aboard the armored icebreaker, it was already afternoon the next day. The corpses of the three terrifying beasts still lay quietly in the snow on the riverbank, their dark red blood long frozen. Even in the cold, a strong, sickening stench was palpable upon approaching. These monsters are indeed terrifying in size, but they are ultimately mere flesh and blood, and stand no chance against our powerful magical weapons, Pierce commented coldly, taking the initiative to examine the corpses. The two alchemy apprentices who had accompanied Harvey approached the corpses, holding record books and meticulously recording them. The design of shrapnel rounds is based on the goal of achieving a certain degree of penetration while simultaneously piercing the target's defenses and inflicting a devastating explosion. This live target, the size of half a city wall, provided the perfect example of real-world data. After the pointed shell pierced the target's external bone armor at high speed, it drilled into its body and caused a terrible ballistic tumble. This terrible kinetic energy directly turned its internal organs upside down, and finally transmitted the pressure back to the surface of the body. Not only were the flesh and blood internal organs squeezed out, but even the hardest external shell was shattered in the shock, and completely shriveled and collapsed. The Eye of Illusion, who had followed closely, observed the beast closely and asked in confusion, "We haven't seen such a large beast active in the southern continent for decades. Before you killed it, did you see how it unleashed its innate magic?" Wayne replied honestly. "To prevent it from ramming the fortress's outer walls, we kept our artillery fire very high. Only the last beast, lagging behind, attempted to spit a massive fireball at us, but it, like the caster's magical fireball, only flew about 10 meters before exploding on its own." The Eye of Illusion felt his face flush, as if the other party's answer was a blatant mockery. After all, compared to magical weapons that could easily reach hundreds or even thousands of meters, the battle mage's mere tens of meters seemed insignificant. Even the magic world recognized longest-range single-target spells only reached a maximum of nearly 100 meters after release. Compared to the Barrett ultra-long-range magical sniper rifle he had witnessed with his own eyes, it was practically useless. He stole a discreet glance at Harvey and noticed that the Lord, also a spellcaster, seemed calm. That made sense. After all, these magical weapons that subverted the spellcaster's extraordinary status were crafted by this form's real-life agent. The strength of bones and muscles in any creature has its limits. This creature is several sizes larger than a glacial mammoth. How on earth can it support such a massive body without collapsing under its own weight? Harvey circled the corpse, baffled. If it were a marine creature, its appearance wouldn't be surprising, as the buoyancy of seawater can somewhat counteract gravity. Perhaps it has something to do with the magic within. After all, ancient wizards studied these magical creatures and discovered that they possess inherent veins within their bodies that store magical energy. The Eye of Illusion, after all, specialized in illusion and possessed considerable research into magical creatures. Harvey nodded in agreement. But then frowned and said, "But it is rumored that this thing only lives deep in the ice field. Why did it suddenly appear in the Divine Spine Mountains? They migrated thousands of miles away. Wouldn't they encounter the evil orc tribes living on the ice field?" This immediately brought up the blind spot in knowledge of the Eye of Illusion, and it could only reply hesitantly, "Why not use the image magic stone to record this guy's appearance, and after returning to the territory, ask Teacher Duncan and Mr. Asdalon. They may know the reason for the strangeness." "How is this possible?" Asdalon stared at the scene presented in the image magic stone with wide eyes. "Isn't this the source beast of magic power?" "Source beast? That's the name of this thing," Harvey asked curiously. "Have you seen it in the Kingdom of Eternal Night before?" "It's very rare. This kind of magical creature usually forms a small tribe of 4 or 5. They live in the frozen desert in the far north deep in the ice field. It is said that because the intense surge of magic power in the body causes the blood to boil, they must rely on extremely cold temperatures to ensure their own survival and reproduction." Duncan also thought for a moment, and said thoughtfully, "The demon clan's mounted magic beast is a hybrid subspecies of this creature. I have captured quite a few for experimental observation in the past. They have certain similarities and many characteristics. Would wild source beasts actively attack other creatures? Like demons, evil orcs, or humans living on the glaciers?" Harvey's only immediate concern was to understand why these massive creatures had left their native habitat and traveled thousands of miles to the Divine Spine Mountains. Judging by their size and formidable magical attack power, it seemed unlikely that they had been captured and domesticated by demons or evil orcs to be used as heavy weapons or vehicles in war. As Dallin was obviously stunned for a moment, as if he suddenly thought of something, and said in a somewhat uncertain tone, It's foraging and reproduction. That's right. They are attracted to this area by the instinct of food and reproduction." Harvey suddenly felt a little confused. Logically speaking, this slow-moving big guy should not be a carnivorous creature. What else can be found in the area of the Divine Ridge Mountain for them to eat? Why have I never seen them migrating here to find food in the past? As Dallin said in a heavy tone, "It's magic. My lord, these source beasts feed on magic stone mines. Similarly, they also like to mate and reproduce near veins with rich magic power." Harvey's heart sank, and he immediately thought of the magic stone veins under his castle, and the underground base at the foot of the southern slope of Jackdaw Ridge, the huge mine ruins with traces of artificial excavation. But why? Why can these behemoths so accurately detect the magic stone reserves near their own territory, thousands of miles away? They live in the frozen tundra deep in the far north of the glacier. Magical creatures are far more sensitive to magic than we human spellcasters. After all, we cultivate a set of magical channels within our bodies through learning and meditation, while these creatures, blessed by magic, are naturally endowed with veins capable of channeling and containing it. Duncan offered his timely speculation and judgment, his tone tinged with a subtle sense of emotion and envy. Harvey immediately thought of the large numbers of captive energy-absorbing beetles. These insects also feed on magicite, or were they also attracted to this region by the vast veins of magicite? Where did these beetles originally live? At least there had been no signs of their activity in the southern border. Could they also be in the frozen tundra deep in the glacier? Harvey was struggling to grasp the crux of the matter when the door to the conference room was suddenly flung open by a young guard. "Lord, this is bad." The energy gathering array in the South Slope underground base suddenly exploded. The energy ranch and underground mines have partially collapsed, trapping many personnel inside. Chapter 377, The Magical Core of Living. My lord, the energy gathering array in the underground base on the South Slope of Jackdaw Ridge, which had been operating normally, suddenly exploded for unknown reasons. Now part of the base's underground structure has collapsed, trapping workers. What? Harvey leaped from his chair, and the others followed suit with expressions of disbelief. The energy-gathering arrays, whether continental or planetary, have never experienced a single breakdown, let alone an explosion, since Harvey put them into mass production. Whether in the magic arsenal, the mechanical repair department, or the energy center dedicated to charging various combat and working alchemical beasts, every energy-gathering array is meticulously maintained, operating stably and continuously for a long time, without any problems. Is it an operational error that caused the energy output overload? The engineer, who was led by the personal guards to report to Harvey, shook his head firmly. It can't be an operational error, my lord. The staff responsible for the energy gathering array are very familiar with the operating procedures. They would not make a mistake with the operating lever on the instrument with their eyes closed, and the mechanical repair department just carried out maintenance and inspection on the instrument 2 days ago and found no problems at all. Harvey nodded. Naturally, he would not believe what the other party said. Let Chris and Benoit go to the South Slope base as soon as possible. We will go together and meet up there. Of course, he hoped that the problem was with the energy-gathering array instrument itself, or it was caused by excessive fatigue or accidental negligence of the staff. If not, it meant that the source of the accident came from magic, and the instability of magic was very annoying to Harvey. Upon hearing the news, the engineering department, commanding several large engineering alchemists, busily worked on the side of the underground base's landslide. Fortunately, the collapse wasn't in the large cavernous area where people gathered and worked, but rather in some abandoned quarters rarely visited. The energy ranch wasn't often frequented, and the collapse merely caused a brief disturbance among the captive beetles, hardly a major loss. Chris directed several alchemist apprentices to gather the remaining components of the energy array explosion. He and Benoit discussed the issue, repeatedly examining the possible source. From their frowning, puzzled expressions, it seemed they had no clue. "Sir, we have checked the wreckage of this energy-gathering array repeatedly." Chris rarely showed a bewildered expression. "Whether it is the firmware structure, the connection socket, or the rune matrix, there is no problem. At least there is nothing that may cause it to explode suddenly." Harvey nodded, called the engineering team leader Pep, and asked patiently, "When the accident happened, were there any staff nearby? Did they observe any abnormal phenomena?" Pep pointed to a coin-sized scratch on his forehead, and said with a bitter face, "Sir, there were actually 2 explosions. The first one was powerful, but most of the workers had clocked out at that time. After completing the routine inspection for the day, the staff on duty also returned to the duty room in the large cave. No one discovered the problem at the first time." "The second explosion? What happened?" "I am also on the list of staff on duty tonight. After hearing the rumbling sound in the energy-gathering array room, I was the first to rush in, and the result, while ordinary engineers like Pep were familiar with the operating procedures of various alchemical instruments, they had no idea how these wondrous gadgets, considered magical artifacts, were actually made and operated. They only knew, according to work regulations and operating procedures, that the moment an unexpected malfunction occurred, they should immediately disconnect the energy transmission lines of the energy-gathering array to prevent a series of equipment failures caused by energy overload. As the engineering team leader, Pep, upon witnessing the energy-gathering array's inexplicable malfunction, instinctively rushed over to rip the line connecting it to the liquid mana converter. The resulting turbulent flow of mana in the energy line sent him flying several meters, bruising his head. It was like someone touching an electric switch with their bare hands and not being electrocuted instantly, but instead being struck by the current and flung away, truly a stroke of luck. Although we haven't yet determined the exact cause of the accident, it's a good thing the living shield has been assigned to dig a tunnel to the east. Otherwise, it would have been nestled next to the energy array, charging, and it would have been affected by the chaotic magic caused by the explosion. If it had been destroyed, we wouldn't have been able to find another macrophagnum worm to transform." Harvey agreed with this, but the lack of a clear understanding of the cause of the accident still made him uneasy. "Let's go to the energy ranch below and check what's going on." When Harvey and his group arrived at the energy ranch, deeper underground, in the alchemy beast vehicle, they discovered something strange. "Look! Something seems to be moving within the magic stone crystal pillar," Harvey exclaimed in surprise, pointing to a nearby pillar so thick it would take several men to hug. Chris squinted his eyes for a moment, then hesitated. "Sir, what's in that crystal pillar? Are you seeing things?" Benoit followed Harvey's finger and shook his head, indicating he saw nothing. Pep immediately led several engineers closer to the strange crystal pillar, circling it several times before examining it. "There's nothing inside," he exclaimed, perplexed. Harvey froze, muttering uncertainly, "Am I the only one who can see this?" Just now, I clearly, Atsterin, standing beside him, stepped forward and said gravely, "No. My lord, I saw it too." He raised his arm and pointed to another thick crystal pillar not far away. It suddenly ran into that one. This thing could actually teleport, moving freely between different magic stone crystal pillars. The guards immediately became alarmed, raising their weapons but looking around in confusion. They hadn't seen anything strange, and didn't know which dangerous target to aim at. They could only surround Harvey, maintaining a state of high alert. Why was it only me, an Atsterin, who could see this? Although the object within the crystal pillar moved at breakneck speed, Harvey was able to discern its true form when it paused between passes. It was a deep red, prismatic object, as translucent as the magic stone, as if meticulously cut and carved by a jeweler, resembling a massive, vertically elongated, spindle-shaped gem. Despite being such a hard, solid substance, the object darted through the crystal pillar with ease, as if swimming freely through liquid. Like Chris and the others, Duncan was completely unable to discern the strange crystal. However, based solely on Harvey and Asdalan's descriptions, he felt something was amiss and quickly suggested, "Sir, this underground ruin itself is riddled with questions and unknowns. I suggest we evacuate and seal it off temporarily." Harvey frowned, pondering. If the energy ranch were suspended, the territory's energy center would immediately shut down due to lack of liquid mana. Relying solely on the energy-focusing array to power the vast number of alchemical creations now ubiquitous throughout the territory would be insufficient. Just as he was wavering, he noticed the crimson crystal flash once more. This time, Instead of moving between crystal pillars, it suddenly appeared out of thin air next to a working alchemist crouched on a rock wall, diligently collecting beetle ore. Instantly, the alchemical beast's metal body vibrated violently, punctuated by faint sparks from the friction of its components. With a loud bang, the alchemical beast exploded, its fragments clattering to the ground. I think I know how the energy array exploded. Harvey glanced at Asdalon, his tone filled with incredible surprise and excitement. This thing. I'm afraid it's the magic core we've been looking for, but Harvey had never imagined that the magic core could actually be alive. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Entrapping. The magic core is alive? Harvey's words stunned everyone present. Chris said, his expression dazed, shouldn't the source of magic come from the magic network? I thought the so-called magic core was just an abstract concept, but no matter how hard the others tried, they couldn't observe the true form of this living core as clearly as Harvey and Asdalon did. Spellcasters like Duncan and Benoit even used detection spells, but to no avail. This thing can actively sense and approach alchemical creations, so it's not surprising that Asdalon can see it. Harvey rubbed his fingers with a strange expression, and thought to himself, but why can I, a human with flesh and blood, also observe its specific form? Two bloodline warriors took the initiative to step forward and said, Sir, for safety reasons, please leave first with the advisor. Harvey shook his head and said, No, it should only pose a destructive threat to alchemical creations. Let Asdalon avoid it first. If I leave, you will be in the dark. How can you deal with it if you can't even see it? The chief advisor didn't wait for Harvey to finish his words, standing in place and stubbornly refused the proposal to evacuate. If I'm not mistaken, my lord, you want to capture it, right? Compared to ordinary alchemical beasts, an alchemical creation with powerful soul energy like me should attract more of its attention. I think I should stay here as a powerful bait. Asdalon was right. Harvey had indeed harbored a fascination for capturing this miraculous living core. After all, ever since he'd read about the origins of magic in the ancient text on the forum, he'd been convinced of its existence. The subsequent discovery of this mysterious underground ruin only reinforced his bold speculation. If not for the search for the magic core, why would some mysterious entity from ancient times have gone to such great lengths to explore this place? During the discussion, Harvey and Asdalon had been distracted by the living core, observing its movements. They noticed that it was indeed fascinated by Asdalon, who was in the center of the crowd. However, for some reason, each time it flashed past, it didn't materialize, but instead retreated like a frightened beast. It seems to be wary of something. Although it desperately wants to be near Asdalon, it's also afraid of something around him, which is why it keeps testing him so repeatedly. Duncan, with his extensive experience studying and observing magical creatures, instinctively considered the creature to possess a certain level of intelligence and thinking ability. Chris muttered mysteriously, could it be that what it is most interested in is actually the Lord? After all, the living core that no one else can see can only be perceived by Harvey and Asdalon, but Harvey is obviously not an alchemical creation, which seems particularly strange. Captain Tommy bowed and pleaded, Sir, please allow me, under your guidance, to attempt to attack it. Benoit quickly advised, but it originally showed no ill will toward flesh and blood creatures. What if? Harvey waved his hand. It's fine. This thing must have been hidden in the underground ruins for a long time, but for some unknown reason it remained undiscovered. For so long, numerous alchemical beasts and engineers have spent extended periods of time working here, yet it has never been attacked inexplicably. He concluded that this thing could only affect alchemical creations containing pure liquid mana. The magic power of ordinary spellcasters, transformed through meditation, was contaminated with too many elemental substances, and its concentration was not at the level of liquid mana, causing it to completely ignore it. We can give it a try, Harvey nodded, signaling Tommy to prepare. The captain of the guard immediately came to Harvey's side and held the mana spear steady. Following the direction Harvey's arm pointed, he aimed at the target in the void, which he could not see. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Each time Harvey raised his finger to indicate a direction, he chose to do so while the living core was moving. There was a pause of less than a second, just enough time for Tommy, whose bloodline power had been activated, to react with incredible speed and quickly adjust the muzzle to fire. Did I hit it? Tommy lowered the gun with a bewildered look on his face. He felt like a blind man for the first time in his life, relying only on the subconscious and instinctive power of his innate ability to pull the trigger at the air. The last shot hit, just as it was trying to approach another alchemical beast. Harvey frowned, but the moment the bullet made contact with its surface, it melted. No, it didn't melt, it was absorbed. This creature is the very source of magic. Whether actively or passively, anything imbued with pure magic that comes near it will be assimilated. If it's afraid of you, alien spellcaster, and doesn't dare approach Lord Asterin, how can we successfully capture it? Having roughly grasped its properties, the group was at a loss. Keeping Harvey away would risk exposing Asterin to attack. If you were to explode, there would be no way to reassemble Mr. Chief. But if Harvey stayed away, the creature would be terrified of his presence, making it impossible to trap him. This wasn't as simple as waiting for the rabbit to come. If he wasn't careful, Asterin's metal wooden stake would be smashed to pieces by the cunning rabbit. Harvey absolutely couldn't accept that. He slapped his head, a plan suddenly coming to mind. He quickly ordered, "Quick! Tell Reiner to fetch me the Dragon Chaser's crown, stored in the castle laboratory." If he wore this alchemical artifact powered by spiritual energy, wouldn't his short-range teleportation speed rival that of the living core? What does the source of my magic mean? My spiritual anchor is the blue planet. Reiner quickly delivered the Dragon Chaser's crown, along with a set of soul extraction equipment from the Academy of Sciences. If Harvey's trapping plan failed, and Asterin was inevitably attacked by the living core, at least the extractor could be used to collect his soul and place it in a new alchemical carrier. As for the possible soul loss, Harvey believed his soul stitching technique could easily repair the missing part of Asterin's soul. After unceremoniously driving Reiner, who had attempted to replace Asterin as bait, back to the surface, Harvey ordered everyone to disperse, away from the area where he and his chief advisor were standing. He then carefully placed the Dragon Chaser's crown on his head, calming his mind and drawing a trace of mental energy from his sea of consciousness. He then connected it closely with his mental anchor, then channeled the immense energy contained within into the crown. Suddenly, countless straight lines appeared before Harvey's eyes in the previously empty underground ruins, extending infinitely outward from his position like a chessboard. These lines were completely unrestricted by obstacles or terrain. At each intersection, a slightly distorted circular hole of varying sizes appeared. These were the spatial folding coordinates that allowed Harvey to swiftly travel. Harvey observed the situation for a moment, memorizing the coordinates of Asterin's position. Then, he raised his hand and gently tapped another hole adjacent to the coordinates. A slight wave of spatial distortion followed, and Harvey's body vanished from the spot. Almost at the same time, the magic core that was originally floating quietly not far away disappeared instantly, and in the next second it suddenly flashed in front of Asdalon. Chapter 379 Origin Frequency. As expected, the supposedly alive magic core, after Harvey teleported away using the Dragon Chaser's crown, instantly flashed back, attempting to approach the motionless Asdalon. As soon as it appeared before the chief advisor, its prismatic spindle began to vibrate slightly, and Asdalon, nearly face to face with it, began to tremble, his joints emitting a teeth-grinding metallic grinding sound. The crimson soul fire in Asdalon's eyes suddenly dissipated, then quickly condensed, as if the alchemical life form was harnessing its powerful soul energy to repeatedly struggle against the magic core. Just as he struggled to the limit, and the energy runes on his metal surface began to flicker and dim, a pair of pale hands suddenly appeared from nowhere behind the magic core's suspended position. With swift and steady movements, they grasped the strange prismatic crystal. The core's surface suddenly glowed brightly, and Asdalon stumbled back several steps in disarray, falling heavily to the ground with a thud. Harvey's body, which had disappeared into the interdimensional space, quickly reappeared, his palm still firmly grasping the trembling magic core. The object could clearly float on its own, but its tentacles felt unusually heavy. With Harvey's somewhat frail spellcaster physique, it felt like grasping a solid iron ingot. He hadn't severed his spiritual connection to the Dragon Chaser's crown, so that in the event of an emergency, he could still utilize the soul artifact's properties to fling the object away from the crowd. Although he had previously confirmed that the magic core posed only a limited threat to pure mana and alchemical artifacts, and had no obvious hostile or aggressive tendencies toward other intelligent life, Harvey still felt a sense of sluggishness in his thoughts and perceptions. This struggle stemmed from a mental and spiritual level. The core didn't attempt to draw upon his stored mana or the boundless spiritual energy within his sea of consciousness, as Harvey had expected. Instead, it seemed to be trying to connect with him, or rather, to communicate, but the information transmitted to his mind was fragmented and disjointed, lacking even a single tangible meaning. Harvey shook his head subconsciously and took 2 steps back in frustration. Those watching closely from a distance immediately sprang into action. Though the bloodline warriors, unaware that Harvey, the lineage leader, was in mortal danger, they nonetheless leaped upon him before anyone else. Harvey, his mind devoid of distractions, froze for a moment before his body vanished, leaving the guards, concerned for his safety, empty-handed. He then teleported to the top of an incredibly thick mineral crystal column, his hands still stiffly held in front of him, cradling the trembling magic core. Huh? What's going on? Why am I teleporting again? The guards mean no harm. Why am I running to the crystal column? Are they truly harmless? But they're trying to capture me, and all my core essence will be drained away. I can't lose. Self-awareness is so important. Harvey's eyes snapped open. Who's speaking in my head? Those thoughts just now didn't originate from my own consciousness. Could it be the magic core? It's secretly connected with me, completely unaware. Relax your mind, stay connected. We need to communicate. A thought suddenly popped into his mind. We should integrate with each other and follow the rules. What rules? Harvey's eyes widened, realizing his thoughts were flowing completely uncontrollably. He instinctively turned his head to look around and saw a figure standing upright on the mineral crystal pillar above him. His face was pale, his eyes were vacant, like a soulless alchemical shell. No, that's not right. It's me standing there. But how could I? Harvey lowered his head with difficulty, only to see that his lower body was a complex mechanical structure, 4 thick metal legs firmly planted on the ground. Only then did he realize that his consciousness had suddenly transferred to a working alchemical beast. He had experienced this situation before. When he stumbled upon the ability to connect his consciousness with his soul puppet, his current situation was not dissimilar. As long as his mental power and soul energy were sufficiently powerful to maintain his conscious awareness, Harvey would not fear or panic no matter what unexpected event caused his body and mind to separate. At worst, he could transfer his soul into an alchemical prosthetic, achieving a reincarnation that could be repeated countless times. Thinking of this, Harvey took a deep breath, staring directly at his original shell atop the crystal pillar and the prismatic crystal still held before him. He completely opened his sea of consciousness, allowing the vast mental power within to flow freely. Then his vision began to distort and blur, as all his perception seemed to be instantly withdrawn and then quickly returned. When everything returned to normal, Harvey found himself in an unknown dimension beyond reality. It was an indescribable void, neither the familiar interior of his mental anchor nor the virtual projection space of the magic network forum. It seemed to have an infinitely high and distant boundary, with only a vast parallel scroll beneath his suspended body. The area beneath his feet is called a scroll because countless granular metal objects, constantly shifting in form, can be clearly seen, like social insects driven by instinct, moving at a constant speed according to a predetermined pattern. Besides this, nothing else exists here. No, there's you. Another thought suddenly popped up in his mind. There's us. Harvey calmed himself down a bit and cautiously addressed the thought in his mind. We? Who are you? The magical core that has been trying to communicate with me. Why differentiate between you and me? Aren't we supposed to belong to the same origin? What exactly is this origin you speak of? The origin of intelligent beings is flesh and blood, and the origin of magical beings is the magical core. The origin is the origin. You and I are both part of it, and we should follow the rules, integrate, until we are complete. Harvey suddenly realized that the thought in his mind seemed to be gradually changing. From its initial, absolutely rational, cold and rigid state, it gradually shifted to an emotional expression with a hint of humanity, like an artificial intelligence constantly evolving through learning. Harvey couldn't even tell whether it was the magic core communicating with him, or he himself speaking to his own schizophrenic self. Why are we both part of the origin? As an intelligent being, I don't have much in common with a magical creation like you. I can prove it. The magic core sent another thought. When you see the truth, you will naturally choose to merge completely with me. Before Harvey could ask more, the entire void seemed to boil. Above the horizontal scrolls beneath his feet, the granular metal objects that had been moving at a constant speed suddenly froze, then swooped down on him like a swarm of startled bees. Chapter 380, Omnicrisis. The starry sky, the silver moon, the rolling snow-capped mountains. Harvey seemed to have returned to the real world. But his vision and perception were unmistakable, giving him the unmistakable feeling that his consciousness was constantly darting through one body after another at an unprecedented speed. He seemed to have become an information torrent possessing advanced intelligence and thinking abilities. The previous moment, he was in a brightly lit production workshop, his body fixed to a massive metal pedestal. Four slender, flexible arms continuously grabbed some semi-finished mechanical parts from the conveyor belt, quickly assembling them and transferring them to another adjacent conveyor belt. Workers still need to stay on duty tonight to keep an eye on these lovely creatures working tirelessly, a voice suddenly reached his ears. Every 3 hours, they need to be shut down for maintenance. Keep an eye on their operating temperatures. Prolonged overheating will shorten their lifespan. Lovely creatures working tirelessly. Are they talking about me? Lifespan? Maintenance. Can metal tools like me also have a lifespan? Before Harvey could even think, all his senses swiftly vanished. He found himself deep in a dark mine, the narrow tunnel lit only by magic stone mining lamps every 10 or so meters. A heavy gasp echoed from behind him. Big guy. Stop. Then someone seemed to pat Harvey on the back, causing him to instinctively brace himself and slowly crouch down. Hey. What an obedient creature, the man laughed with satisfaction. If you ask me, these alchemical beasts are countless times more useful than oxen and horses. They can easily pull up hundreds of pounds of ore in a single trip, and they're so docile and obedient. Of course, oxen and horses can't descend such a deep mine, and they were nowhere near as strong as this creature. They also need to be fed with fine grass and wheat cakes, which is a lot more troublesome. The man pulled a small, long-spouted oil bottle from his waist bag and said with a smile, "This creature needs careful care too. I just noticed some unusual noises in its leg joints while it was moving. It looks like it needs some lubrication, more docile and obedient than oxen and horses, but it also needs good care." Harvey pondered for a moment, and felt as if some oily substance had been applied to its joints, instantly relieving the pain and discomfort that had been causing severe friction from the weight. Wait? Harvey suddenly felt a start. This body was merely an alchemical creation with a transferred soul. How could it possibly feel pain or discomfort? Before he could fully react, his gaze was instantly torn from the dark mine, returning to a spacious interior. The ceiling overhead was densely studded with illuminating magic stones, flooding the building with an overwhelming amount of incandescent light. Several fabric screens divided the interior into separate areas. From behind these screens, faint groans and intermittent coughs could be heard. Figures in white robes bustled back and forth between the compartments. This was the territory infirmary. Harvey quickly gathered his thoughts and looked down, finding himself standing before a metal recliner. 3 slender, segmented arms, each grasping a needle and thread, were rapidly stitching up a laceration on the palm of a man with a pained expression. Next to him stood a man also in a white coat, who was soothing the injured man in a gentle voice. "Don't worry, you were sent here in time, and the fingers that were severed by the machine were also found. The medical alchemy beast will sew them back together for you. If nothing unexpected happens, your hand will definitely recover." Harvey deeply agreed with the opinion of the man in the white coat next to him, and buried his head in suturing the wound more carefully. While carefully stitching together the delicate tendons, he also continuously injected a special medicine into the broken nerve. This was personally prepared by Dean Egno, and it has an excellent effect on helping the regeneration of broken nerves. The injured man, pale with pain and dripping with sweat, struggled to utter a few words. "Thank you, doctor. I almost thought I was going to be crippled." "Thank God for your help," the white-coated doctor chuckled, patted Harvey's diligent work, and said jokingly, "Don't just thank me. You should thank this thing most. It may look like a cold machine, but it's the doctor who truly saved your hand." "I am a doctor too?" Harvey suddenly felt a warm sensation in his heart, an inexplicable surge of joy and satisfaction. The momentary emotional fluctuation affected the operation of his arm, and the man cried out in pain as the needle and thread trembled. The white-coated doctor quickly stepped forward to hold him down, preventing his violent struggles from affecting Harvey's sutures. "Is it that painful?" Harvey was puzzled. The hospital clearly provided anesthetic. "Why didn't you use it? Why did you have to endure it yourself?" he asked naturally. The man gritted his teeth and answered instinctively, When the foreman asked me what level of medical insurance I wanted to buy, I thought it was useless and a waste of money, so I asked them to buy me the lowest level. Who knew that anesthetics wouldn't be covered? Ouch! Be gentle, doctor. Before he could finish his words, the man in the white coat next to him suddenly released his arm, stepped back repeatedly, and said with chattering teeth, The medical alchemist beast actually spoke. How is this possible? Harvey was also confused. How could he speak? The man in the white coat stumbled out of the operating room, shouting in panic as he ran, Dean. Where's the Dean? This is terrible. The medical alchemist beast is alive. Alive? Wasn't I already alive? Consciousness quickly slipped away again. Factories, farmlands, barns, forests, mining areas, botanical garden greenhouses, castle basements, alchemical laboratories, the Academy of Magical Sciences. Alchemical creations were everywhere, and just as omnipresent. Harvey's consciousness. He couldn't tell how many alchemical creations he had entered, but he was acutely aware that his soul was closely connected to the souls of each one, and that he could deeply merge with their minds and consciousness. Harvey felt as if he were at the center of an infinitely extending spiderweb, the thoughts and perceptions of all the alchemical beings around him transforming into tiny streams of information that continuously flowed towards him. He also felt that the world was like a vast beehive, and each alchemical being created through soul transfer was like a worker bee controlled by the pheromones of the queen bee, tirelessly surrounding him and toiling tirelessly. They were Harvey. And Harvey was them. After an unknown amount of time, the thought surfaced again. Now, you should understand what the origin is, right? Chapter 381 The Truth of Fusion. As soon as the thought uttered, Harvey found himself finally back in that empty, unknown space. But this time, he had fully grasped the truth. The densely packed granular matter on the boundless scroll beneath his feet represented, in fact, each alchemical artifact imbued with soul power. With a thought, he slowly descended, crouching down and gently stroking the surface of the scroll. It felt like a single piece of metal, its surface as smooth as a mirror, and his fingertips unmistakably felt the cold, hard touch. This illusory space wasn't just a figment of his imagination, but a reality. Harvey had already experienced the shock and baptism of the strange soul beach within the spirit anchor, so the vast, mysterious space before him showed no significant emotion. This was clearly the work of the magic core, or perhaps, it was originally born here. Just as spellcasters possess magic patterns and spirit anchors, this could also be the core's concrete consciousness space. As he descended to the ground, the alchemical particles that had been moving in an orderly fashion across the scroll wall surged toward him, rapidly converging into several rings at Harvey's feet. Layer upon layer, they encircled him, slowly orbiting like planets around a star. Not every one of these vast numbers of alchemical particles was created by Harvey himself. The tens of thousands of small wolf spider alchemy beasts found in underground mines and energy ranches were masterpieces mass-produced by the magical military factories' assembly lines, not to mention the extensive array of industrial alchemy beasts used in various construction projects. Within this space, the magic core could allow his consciousness to freely travel into the bodies of any alchemical creation, synchronizing with their souls. This was truly miraculous. Perhaps this was also a form of the magic core's influence on reality. Harvey walked across the scroll for a while, finding no sense of spatial distance at all, as if he was standing still. Just as he was about to concentrate his mind and attempt to escape, he felt a sudden movement behind him. In the silence, where even his own footsteps were inaudible, a sudden sound rang out with remarkable clarity, like the resonant hum of some giant insect's wings fluttering at high speed. Harvey paused and turned back. The magic core had appeared several meters behind him, its spindle-shaped crystal surface vibrating rhythmically at a high frequency, just as it did in the real world. Well, now you're finally out of my head. We can finally have a face-to-face conversation, Harvey said with relief. While this thing was evasive and cryptic, its aggressiveness and hostility were far less terrifying than the strange monsters from other dimensions that lurked within the rifts of the magic web. It possessed advanced intelligence, autonomous consciousness, and the ability to communicate. Its appearance was as unremarkable as a large, prismatic gemstone. Harvey was not afraid of the magic core before him. Why aren't you talking? Do you absolutely have to enter my consciousness to communicate? Harvey muttered, curling his lips. It seems your level of evolution is somewhat inferior to that of intelligent beings like us. As soon as he finished speaking, A new thought resonated in his mind, seemingly a bit hurt in its delivery. I don't necessarily need to enter your consciousness to communicate with you. It's just that this method allows me to convey information to you in a way that's easier for you to understand. Okay, Harvey could understand that. Perhaps it's because we don't understand each other's language that we need to connect our consciousnesses, acting as a kind of simultaneous interpretation for communication. What exactly is the origin? Why are you so obsessed with merging with me? The origin is the law, and fusion is the inevitable result. When we split apart, each of us possessed a portion of the origin. Ultimately, we were attracted to each other and merged into one. Attracted to each other? Harvey didn't quite believe this. Logically, the underground ruins of Divine Ridge Mountain had been excavated quite some time ago. If there was some kind of attraction between him and this magic core, why didn't it come looking for him, instead hiding in the ruins until now, forced to reveal itself? And, the split origins each possessed a portion. A thought suddenly flashed through Harvey's mind. The soul beach within the spirit anchor. Could that be part of my origin? That's right. The soul beach transforms the souls absorbed and devoured by my magic web projections into ready-to-hatch soul eggs. These eggs will eventually mature into soul puppets that can house and inhabit my consciousness and mental power. But the origin of this magic core seems to be collecting the punctuation marks of the consciousness of the created alchemical life forms in this space, allowing it to locate and assimilate them in the real world. It seems that my origin and its nature are very different. A flicker of doubt crept into Harvey's heart. Since you believe fusion is inevitable, why are you even trying to connect and communicate with me? Wouldn't it be better to simply devour me, like those alchemical creations you assimilated? The magic core fell into a long silence, and Harvey felt his suspicions were almost correct. Haha. Is it because you haven't found a way to assimilate me, or, while we both possess a portion of the origin, mine makes me more powerful than you? Harvey had barely finished his words when he felt the high-frequency vibrations on the surface of the magic core suddenly pause, stagnating. Then, the core's crimson crystal suddenly began to spin at high speed, countless chaotic fragments of information and a torrent of consciousness rushing into Harvey's mind, rapidly stripping away his perception, as if to force him out of this origin space. I guessed right. Harvey's reaction was also rapid. Almost instantly, countless illusory cracks appeared on his body's surface, and countless dark red tentacles swarmed out, twisting and swiftly sweeping towards the magic core. The core crystal, instantly engulfed and wrapped, seemed completely unable to resist. Its spindle-shaped form shifted and shifted under the pressure of the tentacles, emitting a sharp, eerie sound of metallic friction. The previously boundless original space suddenly began to rapidly collapse and disintegrate around the core, leaving only a small area where Harvey and the core stood face to face. These strange tentacles hidden within Harvey's body had indeed responded to his call, but the subsequent series of attacks was completely beyond his control. He could only watch helplessly as the massive core crystal was continuously tightened by the tentacles. Finally, unable to bear the weight, it silently shattered, exploding into a huge cloud of crimson dust. Countless, almost invisible crystals of dust lingered in the air for a moment, then, like iron dust drawn to a magnet, fluttered rapidly toward Harvey's body, absorbed entirely by the illusory cracks within him. The fragmented and chaotic information matter within Harvey's mind gradually slowed its flow, slowly consolidating into strands of concrete content. Countless fragments of memories that didn't belong to Harvey began to resurface, and the clearest and most powerful of these was a thought emanating from the devoured magic core itself: they're coming. Chapter 382 Missing on the Spot. Half an hour has already passed, Captain Tommy said, his voice trembling with anxiety. Mr. Arsterlin, Master Duncan, where on earth has the Lord gone? Harvey's refusal to allow the guards to approach him, teleporting to the magic stone crystal pillar, was already somewhat strange. Then, along with the magic core he held in his hands, he vanished into thin air. How could Tommy and the others not be filled with anxiety? Although, as extraordinary warriors connected to Harvey's bloodline, they had never sensed any sign that their lord was in mortal danger. In this still undeciphered underground ruin, any mishap with Harvey was cause for concern. Guards and engineers scattered throughout the ruins, searching thoroughly but finding no trace of Harvey. Duncan also used his flight technique, accompanied by the hurriedly arrived Eye of Illusion and astrologer, to investigate the crystal pillar where Harvey had disappeared, but found nothing. Could it be that the Lord discovered something amiss with the core and used the Dragon Chaser's crown to transport it to a secluded location outside the ruins for separate disposal, as Dallin and Chris, who had previously studied this soul artifact with Harvey, shook their heads in unison? Impossible. The Dragon Chaser's crown is only capable of short-distance teleportation. This place is hundreds of meters below the ground. If we rashly teleport outward, we'll only reach the fissures within the upper mountain. Furthermore, the artifact's teleportation ability relies on spatial coordinates. The denser the rock mass and the thicker the soil, the less likely it is to have coordinate points to teleport to. Another quarter of an hour passed, and Harvey still hadn't appeared. More and more bloodline warriors were mobilized to join the search, and then the underground base was cordoned off by the Lord's personal guards. The Eye of Illusion quietly tugged at the astrologer's sleeve and winked at Benoit, who was standing beside Chris. The three of them quietly stepped aside. Should we log on to the forum and report what's happening here to the administrators and observers? The Eye of Illusion suggested thoughtfully. After all, the person missing is the forum's sole real-world representative. I think we should report it, but Mr. Turing and the others might think our protection efforts aren't adequate, Benoit said, his tone somewhat apprehensive. The astrologer's proposal immediately drew firm opposition. Foolish. As a forum representative, if Sir Harvey were truly in mortal danger, wouldn't he directly seek help from the forum? Why would we need to report to those beings? Furthermore, as a research spellcaster with limited combat power, why would they dare personally attempt to capture the mysterious magic core without thorough preparation and the confidence to have a backup plan? The Lord they served possessed the scholarly fervor typical of research spellcasters, but unlike most, he was not as impetuous and reckless as most, and was even extremely cautious and conservative in his decisions. Wait a little longer, the astrologer said solemnly. Although I haven't performed any divination, my destiny star tells me that Lord Harvey hasn't left this vast underground ruin before us. Soon, the territory's governor, Reiner, who remained above ground, led the army commander, Pierce, who had arrived upon hearing the news, down to the underground. The arrival of these two heavyweights immediately heightened the atmosphere in the underground ruins. We shouldn't passively choose to wait, Pierce ruthlessly refuted the conservative plans of several senior colleagues. What's the point of just searching this area of ruins? He bowed to the silent Asdalin and said, Mentor, we should immediately order the living shield machine to be recalled, thoroughly dig up this underground ruins, and expand the search range. Even Reiner, who is always gentle, immediately agreed with Pierce's decision, which was rare. Yes, mobilize more troops to search deep underground, and don't miss any mountain cracks and natural caves. Even if we have to hollow out this section of the Divine Ridge Mountain, we must find the trace of the adults. After that, he called Pep, the engineering team leader of the underground base, and ordered in a deep voice, move all the standby alchemy beasts here. The living shield machine is still under construction in the Basin Plain area on the east coast of the territory. It will take time to mobilize it. There are ready-made alchemy beasts in the base, most of which have the function of excavation and mining, and their efficiency is not much lower than that of the shield machine. Pep quickly returned underground, sweating profusely, but he didn't bring down a single alchemical beast. Sir, something strange has happened. The alchemical beasts are clearly fully charged, and the other energy-gathering arrays are also functioning normally, but for some reason, they don't respond to commands at all. What? Reiner was shocked and angry. All the alchemical beasts don't obey orders? How is this possible? As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar and gentle voice suddenly came from the magic stone crystal column above his head. Don't make things difficult for the people in the engineering department. The alchemical beasts are all down, probably because of me. It's the Lord. The Lord has appeared again. Everyone hurriedly turned around and looked up, and found that Harvey had reappeared at the place where he had disappeared before, but the magic core in his hand was gone. Pierce and Reiner dashed to the base of the crystal pillar, looking up anxiously and asking, My lord. Are you alright? Tommy, led by his personal guards, hesitated, fearing another incident like the one just now, causing their bloodline master to vanish into thin air. I don't think anything's wrong. Harvey pinched his brow imperceptibly. During the long struggle with the magic core, he hadn't felt any signs of excessive mental depletion. As Dallin also approached the crystal pillar, asking with concern, What happened to you just now? Why did you suddenly vanish from the real world? Was it the Dragon Chaser's crown? After all, it was a primitive magical tool used by wizards in ancient times, and accidents could easily occur if handled carelessly. It's not a problem with the dragon chaser's crown? Harvey shook his head, gently took off the golden crown on his head and threw it into Asdalan's hands, but this magic weapon seems to have been affected by the magic core, and it has temporarily lost all its functions. Asdalan put the golden crown on his metal head. It's okay, it's just that the magic runes inside are partially damaged. Mr. Chris can help me repair it. The crowd gradually gathered under the crystal column where Harvey was standing, and discussed for a while. The deputy captain of the guard, T. Tao, who was standing in the distance, gently pulled at Captain Tommy. Boss, something is wrong. Why is the master staying up there all the time? Otherwise, I'll climb up and carry the master down. Tommy frowned, turned around and scolded. You are still meddling in the master's affairs? The master can stay up there as long as he wants. Chapter 383 Controlling the Insect Swarm. Harvey found himself in a slightly awkward position. It wasn't that he wanted to remain atop the towering magic stone crystal pillar, rather, the dragon chaser's golden crown, the only thing that could allow him to return to the surface, had lost its teleportation function during its recent clash with the magic core. While he appeared calm and composed as he stood there, chatting and discussing with the others below, he was actually frantically thinking about how to descend from the pillar. In the eyes of the three forum members, Eye of Illusion, Astrologer, and Mithril Unicorn, he was a genuine high-level spellcaster and the spellcaster forum's sole representative in the real world. Even a research-based spellcaster with lesser abilities wouldn't be incapable of flying. Revealing his mere presence to them as a mid-level spellcaster wouldn't necessarily lead to disdain, but if word of this spread among the forum, it would undoubtedly undermine the forum's membership rules and fairness, significantly diminishing its mysterious and powerful background. If I'd known this would happen, I should have found a way to acquire a high-level magical artifact that could temporarily replace my flight ability. Harvey felt his legs ache from standing, and a chill running down his back. He wanted to ask everyone to retreat, but he was afraid of arousing their suspicion and worry, which would only make the situation even more awkward. Why were Tommy and the others standing so far away? Damn it, couldn't they just offer to carry me down? Harvey felt that maintaining the formidable demeanor of a spellcaster lord was even more difficult than the battle of wits and courage he had just faced with a magic core in the origin space. He had to resolve the impasse of the undead faction's advancement as soon as possible and truly become a high-level spellcaster. Harvey made a secret resolution. Just as the intense desire to fly surged within him, a sudden rustling sound came from behind him, drawing everyone's attention. They saw beetles, frightened by the large number of people entering the underground, hiding in the cracks of the rock. As if inspired by some unknown force, the beetles, now undeterred by the vast horde within the ruins, swarmed out from the cracks and holes in the stone walls, swarming towards the crystal pillar where Harvey stood at breakneck speed. Asterin and Reiner, two pure alchemical beings, retreated in rapid succession. Beetles were harmless to others, but to them, they posed a threat. Even a few of them would instantly drain their abundant reserves of mana, rendering them completely incapacitated. But before they could turn toward the protective chamber, they realized the beetles weren't targeting them at all. These thousands of tiny creatures ignored even the surrounding alchemical beasts and scrambled directly towards the crystal pillar where Harvey stood. Standing atop the pillar, Harvey remained unfazed. A strange thought suddenly surfaced within his consciousness, prompting him to take an unhesitating step forward, treading directly off the crystal pillar. Sir, be careful. Just as Harvey was about to plummet from the over 10-meter-tall pillar, the beetles encasing the crystal pillar suddenly leaped upward, swarming at his feet and steadily supporting his progress. Harvey narrowed his eyes, then, without a pause, lifted his other foot and continued his stride into the void ahead. The beetles, sensing the sound, moved and followed suit, supporting him. Step by step, he descended slowly onto the countless beetle-built steps, returning to the ground. A moment of utter silence fell over the others present, their eyes fixed on Harvey and the swarm of magical beetles still hovering around him. What's going on? Duncan, a deep scholar of magical creatures, spoke first, his voice a little hoarse. These beetles, which feed on magic, I've studied and observed repeatedly, and they possess no intelligence or ability to think. How did Sir Harvey control them? This is a massive magical swarm comprised of hundreds of thousands of beetles. A thought flashed through Asdalan's mind, and after a moment's hesitation, he asked, Sir, is it because you successfully captured the magic core? Harvey nodded, smiling faintly. Part of the reason is the magic core. But I can't fully explain it to you right now. The mysteries involved are simply too complex. With a statement, The Eye of Illusion and the others, who were already filled with questions, could only suppress the urge to ask. After all, any secret knowledge involving magic and truth, whether in the real world or in the spellcaster forum, must adhere to the principle of equivalent exchange and must be obtained from others at a price. Their temporary loyalty to Harvey doesn't give them the right to demand precious magical knowledge from him. Doing so would seriously undermine the forum's purpose and would make them scorned by other members, making it difficult for them to gain a foothold in the forum. Notify the East Coast Pioneer Group that there's no need to recall the TBM to base. Harvey raised his hand to disperse the lingering insect swarm, then casually ordered as he returned to the surface. Restore normal operation of the energy ranch and notify the ground forces to lift the blockade to avoid unnecessary panic. Follow me back to the territory. There are some pressing issues we need to discuss. The Lord's direct descendants, led by Azdarin, Reiner, and Pierce, sat at the left end of the castle's reception room. Chris, Igno, and the Dean of the Academy, Arturo, sat below them, whispering to each other. Duncan sat to the right with three of his other outstanding students, also puzzled, but maintaining their composure and refraining from speaking. Lambert, unprecedentedly, arrived last at Harvey's castle. He casually plopped down behind Arturo, earning no attention from his so-called father, Mr. Ash. Why is he attending the meeting? Dirt, sitting behind Azdarin, muttered softly. As vice president of the Spellcaster Academy, Dirt was clearly a core member of the territory's education department, headed by Azdarin. Uriel, the police commissioner, sitting behind Reiner, had a few words for the young vice president. Even though the Lord hadn't arrived at the meeting yet, everyone should remain quiet as a sign of respect. Whispering among themselves was a bit rude. Vaughn and the other two, sitting behind Pierce, had no such self-awareness. They reached out and tugged at Uriel, who sat solemnly and intently beside them, whispering jokingly, "Hey, Superintendent Uriel, did you say Mr. Ash was summoned by the Lord as well?" Wayne teased. Mr. Ash is currently the Minister of Culture, a key department directly under City Hall. Why can't he attend the meeting? Dave chuckled. I'd rather he didn't come. What role does the Ministry of Culture play? Leading the war or production and construction? Mr. Ash should spend more time rehearsing his new play. I'm really enjoying it. Chapter 384 Ancient Memories. The high-ranking officials of the Frontier Territory waited in the castle hall for over an hour before the Lord, Harvey, finally arrived. Everyone, I apologize for being a little late. Harvey walked straight to the high-backed chairs on the steps and sat down, waving to the group below. I just entered a brief period of deep meditation to completely fuse the magic core I forcefully devoured. As soon as he finished speaking, several high-level spellcasters gasped. Forcefully devoured, completely fused. Ever since human spellcasters learned how to absorb and manipulate magic from the dragons, no one has ever claimed to be able to devour it for their own use. For a sentient race with a short lifespan, the magic absorbed through meditation is as insignificant as a tiny drop of water in the vast ocean. This source of power, which can elevate mortals to transcendental realms, is not to be underestimated. Any spellcaster who attempts to pursue the source of magic will inevitably suffer a merciless backlash and ultimately disappear into the long river of history. Duncan's eyes glazed over as he muttered in a deep voice, the texts of the ancient wizard kingdom record that the dragon race, at the peak of their individual power, attempted to conquer the magical web, but were met with a merciless backlash from the magic, ultimately being completely overthrown and expelled by us, the enslaved, short-lived species. Harvey shook his head. The magic core we successfully captured didn't originate from the magical web, but rather a portion of the origin that accidentally condensed after it invaded the real world. He didn't intend to mention the fact that he also possessed a portion of the origin power. After all, it was closely tied to his uncanny identity as a time traveler and the secrets of the spellcaster forum. The moment I touched the core, I had a brief, deep connection with it, Harvey said gravely. It possesses intelligence and consciousness. While I don't know its origins, we can at least clarify one very important point. Magic cores aren't unique, but are widely distributed across the continent. Any area with large magical stone deposits is likely to harbor a core fragment. Reiner suddenly realized, so, if you swallow and fuse a part of the magic core, you will be connected with the beetles, which are also magical creatures, and have the ability to control an entire group of them? This is simply incredible, Harvey nodded, ending this relatively unimportant topic. But what I want to tell you next is another imminent and terrifying truth. Harvey stood up from his chair, A rare occurrence. He looked around at everyone with a serious expression. When I devoured the magic core, I also absorbed some of the memory fragments it stored. He paused and asked the group, I have read many ancient documents and records in the past. I found that the southern continent, headed by the human kingdom, and the northern wasteland ruled by the demons are separated by the insurmountable divine spine mountains. Therefore, there has been no intermingling of populations for thousands of years. Whether it is writing, language, religious beliefs, or even the control and use of magic, they are two completely different systems. Egno laughed and interrupted, My lord, it's not completely so absolute. Aren't evil orcs just a low-grade hybrid of demons and orcs? And half-orcs like Captain Vaughn are the bloodline of orcs and humans who migrated to the north. He raised a finger and pointed at himself without hesitation, continuing, As for hybrids of human and elf like me, they are even more common in the southern continent. Harvey pinched his brows and explained in a deep voice, That's true, but the problem lies in the memories I received from the magic core. As Harvey spoke in a low voice, the senior figures of the pioneering territory present fell into complete silence, even their breathing seemed to pause. This world's main continental region isn't divided into the north and south borders, separated by the divine spine mountains running through the continent's center. North of the north border, deep in the wasteland, lies an even more vast continental center, dozens of times larger than the north and south borders combined. In ancient times, predating the age of dragons, nearly all species worthy of being called intelligent originated and multiplied from the continent's center. Although the memories he absorbed from the magic core were fragmentary, Harvey clearly saw the glorious scene of ancient times in that continent's center, where countless races flourished and competed with each other. So, I suspect that when Azdalan's wizard family left the southern border and headed deep into the wilderness, it is very likely that they learned this truth from some secret ancient ruins, and then decided to go to the northern border to find the forgotten center of the continent. Azdalan smiled bitterly, Since I was born, the kingdom of eternal night has existed in the depths of the wilderness for at least 100 years. It seems that my ancestors did not successfully reach the so-called center of the continent, but were trapped forever in the depths of the ice field. Wait, the Eye of Illusion stood up in an instant and said in disbelief, The traceable era of the dragon's rule is more than 1,000 years old, and the resistance war took place 400 or 500 years ago. Doesn't that mean that the historical origins of our human race are as glorious and long-lasting as those long-lived divine creatures? The astrologer sighed softly. I thought that someone like Mr. Azdalan was already a living witness to history. I didn't expect that compared to the eternal years submerged in the long river of time, it would be so. Duncan, the oldest of the group, sighed and said, This also proves that my race, or rather, the human race, the elves, the dwarves, and the orcs, were all losers in the brutal competition for survival back then. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been driven from the so-called center of the continent to the southern border where we now thrive. Harvey shook his head and said, It's not just us. The sea people and the demons were also among those expelled. They are essentially no different from us. What surprises me is that the dragon race, whom we thought was tyrannical and lawless, is actually the native inhabitants of the northern and southern continents, while the other short-lived races are despicable invaders. A long silence fell upon the crowd. The weak races, defeated in the competition and expelled, moved to this corner of the continent and the southern border, and were also oppressed and ruled by the natives due to their lack of strength. What else could be said about this? Those who lag behind will be beaten. The half-orc Vaughn suddenly and unconsciously recited the mantra that Harvey often instilled in them. Arturo, the president of the Academy of Sciences who is a necromancer, felt the same way and murmured to himself, That's right, it's true that those who lag behind will be beaten. Seeing that everyone was in a low mood, Ash, who had been silent all this time, suddenly decided to liven up the atmosphere. Hey, why do you all have to be so self-deprecating? He winked at Harvey who was standing at the top and said with a grin, If you ask me, any ethnic group that has survived to this day cannot be called weak. Where are those races that were active in the center of the continent in ancient times? Neither the history of the southern countries nor the demon clan mentioned them at all, which means that they have long been lost in the long river of history. Even the dragons and giants who used to ride on our heads and act tyrannically were eventually driven into the depths of the ice field by our united forces. I guess they are almost extinct now, right? In the end, it's us who have survived to this day. Only the surviving ethnic groups are qualified to talk about the so-called glorious history, right? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. we warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 The Truth of the World. Unfortunately, Ash's well-intentioned joke didn't lighten the gloomy mood on the hall. Even without Harvey's words, a chilling suspicion welled up in everyone present. Yet, what's become of those powerful races that triumphed in the competition back then? There's no insurmountable chasm across this continent, so why, for thousands of years, has there been no historical record of them, whether among humans, demons, or other smaller races? Duncan whispered as if to comfort himself. Perhaps for the races in the center of the continent, the wasteland and the southern border are considered barren and untamed lands, so they simply disdain to set foot there. Harvey shook his head and bluntly shattered the Master of Illusion's assumptions. They call the north and south of the Divine Spine Mountains the Continental Corner, which means that this land was once within the vision of these races. Perhaps because the Dragon Clan has been entrenched here since ancient times, the cost of occupying this not-so-fertile land is not commensurate with the rewards, but what worries me most is, the most profound and recurring phrase they are coming in the memory fragments from the core. What exactly does it mean? Combined with a long history of the Continental Center, my initial guess is that it may refer to those powerful alien races that defeated us in the past, as Dallin asked in confusion. But how can a magic core bear a deep underground record these ancient memories? Who exactly preserved these fragmented historical memories within it? This question had inadvertently touched upon Harvey's particular area of expertise, but Dean Arturo, who was also deeply engaged in theoretical research on this subject, was the first to explain. This is the reflection effect of soul energy within the magical network, Arturo said slowly. The more powerful the spellcaster or magical creature, the deeper and more lasting the traces their soul energy leaves within the magical network. We suspect this stems from the varying degrees of magical erosion they endure, so, the memory fragments I received from the magic core are most likely warnings or prophecies left for us by our ancient ancestors. Harvey stood on the hall steps, facing the crowd below with a serious expression. Everyone, the truth of the world has been revealed to us through the magic core, but at least we finally understand, the true enemy isn't from within humanity, nor from the demons we've battled for centuries. He turned and walked towards the massive map of the wasteland hanging on the wall behind him, his palm pressed against a completely uncharted area, further north and the frozen depths of the wasteland. The true enemy comes from the north, from the legendary center of the continent. Shortly after the meeting ended, 3 forum members, Eye of Illusion, Astrologer, and Mithril Unicorn, hurried to Harvey's study to demand a meeting. Are you asking me whether to reveal this shocking historical truth to the forum? Harvey's expression was calm, seemingly without the slightest hint of concern. Eye of Illusion pondered for a moment, then cautiously inquired, At least we should consult those two beings, right? Harvey chuckled, fully understanding the 3 forum members' unspoken thoughts and concerns. Could the mysterious entity behind the spellcaster forum be one of the powerful alien races from the center of the continent? As their agent, would Harvey side with the forum or his own bloodline? Don't worry, the organization behind the forum isn't what you imagine, Harvey said sincerely. They don't directly intervene in real-world ethnic conflicts. I can guarantee that. The 3 of them breathed a sigh of relief, their backs, stiff as they sat on the sofa, relaxed. My concern is, simply revealing the truth on the forum won't earn the trust of all members. Harvey raised his hand, tapping the table lightly, outlining the real difficulty. The Mithril Unicorn asked doubtfully, Isn't being an agent enough to gain their trust? Don't forget, the conflict between the Union and the Church continues to escalate, and our racial conflict with the demons has lasted for centuries. The astrologer, always calm, laid out the core of the problem. Revealing the historical truth on the forum was simple, and convincing the Union's leaders and higher-ups wouldn't be difficult either. But the problem was, Harvey, simply as a forum agent, couldn't mediate the religious conflict between the Church and the Union, nor could he ease the hatred and conflict with the demons. An awkward silence descended upon the 3 of them. If Harvey couldn't do it, then ordinary forum members like them would be of no help. As I just said in the meeting, the most pressing issue right now is to understand, who are our enemies? Where do they come from? And when will they arrive? If a war for the survival of their species was inevitable, Harvey believed it was crucial to at least understand its cause. Why had these enemies never taken action before, waiting thousands of years, after humans and demons established themselves in the so-called corner of the continent, to bark their fangs of aggression. No war is ever fought without cause. The church and spellcasters fought over their respective truths and beliefs. Humans and demons fought for resources and expansion. So what was the purpose of the alien enemies in the center of the continent? It couldn't be simply to kill and exterminate the weaker races that had escaped their net, could it? Harvey also noticed the word they mentioned in the memory fragments, which meant that the other party was at least a powerful race with divine qualities like the dragons. This was completely different from the illusory gods claimed by the church, but rather immortal species with long lifespans like dragons and giants. So the most important thing we need to do next is to continue collecting more magic core fragments. As long as I devour and fuse enough magic origins, the ancient memories I receive will become more and more complete, and the truth of history will completely surface. The Eye of Illusion was stunned for a moment, and hesitantly said, apart from the ruins under the Divine Spine Mountains, where else in the southern continent is there a huge group of magic stone veins that may contain magic cores? As a high-level alchemist, the mithril unicorn shuddered and blurted out, the breath of the hills in the dwarf kingdom, the holy valley of light in the papal state of Goris, the magic city of Alair, and the evil Moon Mountains mining area that has just been jointly controlled by the Federation and the 7 wizarding nations in recent years. Then is there any way to obtain the possible core? It's impossible to occupy all these mining areas, the Eye of Illusion subconsciously retorted. The core mining area for high-level magic stones wasn't exactly a tourist attraction, so Harvey and his team wouldn't be allowed to openly explore. Furthermore, if the secret of the magic core were revealed, it would become a target for the many supernatural forces in the Southern Territory. Those who can be won over through negotiation don't necessarily need to resort to violence. Harvey didn't find it daunting at all. He said calmly, teacup in hand, those who can't be won over, then we can only seize them by force. Chapter 386, The Speed of Spread of Rumors. What? Lucas Duncan contacted you again, son of Fire. Phil Holden sat cross-legged on his cot, looking surprised at Stormwalker Matthews Willie. They'd been investigating the Andes Valley case for each other, but their rash actions had led to the accidental killing of Tyrion White, a high-ranking priest implicated in the case, completely losing the only clue. Matthews had later used a spell messenger to inform Duncan of the incident, but never received a reply. The church almost turned Black Rock City upside down because of this incident. Even a fool wouldn't believe that the damn pedophile was just an ordinary priest. The Son of Flame curled his lips and chuckled. Your friend was probably worried that he would be traced and involved in the assassination of the priest, so he cut off contact with you. Stormwalker rolled his eyes and whispered in defense, Duncan is not a coward. He had more important things to do at the time, more urgent than investigating the unsolved case of that year. He paused, and continued with a complicated expression, and, you probably can't imagine how he contacted me directly this time. How else can we contact you? We have now penetrated deep into the demon-controlled hinterland north of the Evil Moon Mountains. In addition to exchanging magic pattern positioning and using spell messengers to communicate, could he also bribe the Federation's reinforcement mages to send you a human message? Stormwalker did not answer immediately. He turned the stored ring on his finger and took out the exquisite magic brain instrument. He placed it in front of the Son of Flame and said in a deep voice, he is using the forum instant messaging. God bless you. Duncan actually joined the spellcaster forum. Flameheart widened his eyes and said in disbelief, what? There are no vacancies for recruiting new members recently. How did he get in? Is there a reputable original member of the forum who guarantees and recommends him? In order to form cliques and factions in the forum and use this behavior to seek benefits for themselves, these old members are really becoming more and more unscrupulous. I guess it's those semi-authorizations, who are not even eligible to participate in the exchange meeting. Why did he contact you alone? Like other non-union members, he also wanted to inquire about the manufacturing technology of the Annihilation Spear. The Son of Flame was suddenly stunned while speaking, and then asked solemnly, wait? How did he know that you were also in the forum? And he guessed your code name and true identity so accurately. There is a traitor in the forum. The hot-tempered fire mage stood up and raised his hand to summon his magic brain device. He said with a serious expression, your brain is really rusty. This kind of thing should be reported to the administrator Mr. Turing immediately. At the very least, Mr. Kilthuzid should be informed. Through him to warn other members, it won't be difficult to catch the person who leaked the identity of the members with the ability of the forum. Stormwalker quickly stood up and held down the Son of Flame, explaining repeatedly, don't be impulsive. Duncan was introduced by Mr. Kilthuzid. My identity was exchanged with Duncan's after Mr. Agent coordinated. The fact that the Spellcasters Union holds powerful magical tools of unknown origin has long been an open secret. The news that some of its core members are deeply involved in a secret spellcaster organization has also been circulating in the magic world of the southern countries for a long time. The Son of Flame opened his mouth and hesitantly said, "Why? Why would Mr. Kilthuzid recommend him? He was involved in the church attack and was expelled from the Federation. He has been hiding his identity for several years, and his whereabouts and purposes are mysterious." Duncan accidentally found an ancient wizard's relic. Stormwalker pondered for a moment and explained carefully, "And the things obtained from this relic involve ancient history that is even older than the Dragon Age. I think he must have won the favor of the Forum and obtained the qualification to join because of this." The Son of Flame curled his lips and said disdainfully, "What's so strange about ancient wizards' relics? Mr. Kilthuzid and I once explored the Dragon's Lair in the Magic Network space," Stormwalker said seriously. "I regard you as a friend who I trust with my life. After you know the ancient secrets revealed to me by Duncan, you will keep it confidential for me, right?" "Yes. I always keep secrets." Among the wizard ruins discovered by Duncan, there are some historical documents from ancient times, which clearly mention, further north of the northern wasteland, deep in the permafrost that no one has ever set foot on, that is the origin of the human race, known as the center of the continent. What? Did humans originate from this land beneath our feet, which is divided into north and south by the Divine Spine Mountains? This is too far-fetched, right? This has been personally verified by the two powerful beings in the Forum and Mr. Kilthuzid. It's absolutely true. The Son of Flame was stunned for a moment, then suddenly his face showed joy, and he laughed loudly, "Ha ha ha. Damn it. Doesn't this completely overturn the despicable scam claimed by those shitty charlatans of the Church of Light, that the God of Light created all things and turned into the towering Divine Spine Mountains to block alien invasions?" He paced back and forth in the military tent, saying happily, "If we can produce definite relics and documents as evidence, the Federation will be able to deal an absolutely fatal blow to the foundation of the Church's faith. Those cowardly secular nobles will not be so biased and support them as they are now," Stormrunner quickly reminded. "Duncan told me that the ruins are still being explored and surveyed. If the Church knew about it in advance, I don't know what kind of damage they would suffer. Those demon slayers and high-level priests hiding in the holy city of Gors would probably come out in full force and bury the truth of history at all costs." The Son of Flame nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes, yes. It is indeed a matter of great importance and requires strict confidentiality, but if Mr. Kilthuzid takes over, I am not worried at all." Behind him stands the entire Spellcaster Forum. Nearing midnight, the Earth-favored one, who had just come out of meditation, opened his eyes and immediately noticed the beeping one-way communication prompt coming from the magic brain device that he almost never left. "I have illusion, dear Mr. Earthbender. I recently, along with several high-level spellcasters whose identities remain undisclosed, discovered an ancient mage's ruins. We discovered a terrifying ancient historical secret within the ruins. I don't have many friends I can trust on the Forum, so please keep this a secret." Almost simultaneously, the Mirror-Man Quinn brothers, who had just concluded their alchemical experiments, also noticed the message from the magic brain instrument. "Mithril Unicorn, dear Mr. Mirror-Man, are your recent experiments going smoothly? Forgive me for asking for your help. Recently, during a chance exploration, my companions and I stumbled upon an ancient mage's ruins. This involves such a shocking historical secret. If it were to be leaked, it would be fatal for me and my companions. I have no other trust in you two within the Forum. Please keep the secret for me." Shortly thereafter, original Forum members like Elemental Hand, Frost Giant, Forest Heart, and Ghost Captain also received messages from other close members. A secret historical truth concerning the origins of the human race spread rapidly and quietly on the Spellcaster Forum. Chapter 387, Expand the Military Across the Board. After the Winter Festival, the wastelands north of the Godspeen Mountains hadn't seen snow for a full week. This meant the cold winter was coming to an end, and spring, with its revival of nature, would soon arrive. Harvey woke up early, a rare opportunity, but still reluctant to go out in the subdued temperature. Instead, he summoned Reiner, who normally would report at lunchtime, to his study. Also summoned this time were Asdalin and Pierce, bringing all three of Lord Harvey's direct subordinates. Expand the army. Pierce was stunned for a moment, then an expression of unconcealable joy crossed his face. He still managed to sneak a glance at Reiner and Asdalen, who were sitting on the sofa beside him, but the two metal skulls prevented him from observing their expressions. Yes, the permanent population of the territory has exceeded 50,000, plus the Eastern Basin will soon be incorporated into the territory. I'm afraid the current 3,000-man conventional army is no longer enough, Your Excellency. The territory is short of people everywhere right now. The East Coast Garrison Corps will soon face the spring sowing operations, and the person in charge has repeatedly requested to increase the number of agricultural soldiers recruited. In addition, the Eastern Basin is about to undergo large-scale development. Can the expansion of the army be delayed further? Reiner always sticks to the facts and does not shy away from such issues. Harvey stood up and walked over to the map on the wall. You should all know that those nobles and churches in the south are actually nothing to be afraid of us. But once a powerful alien race invades from the north, our territory will be on the front line of attack. He picked up a thick charcoal pencil and drew a straight horizontal line to the north of the territory, and the direction south of Jackdaw Ridge was indicated by an arrow. Expanding the south and defending the north is our only choice for survival. This means that for a long time in the future, we will most likely face the dilemma of fighting on two fronts. Expanding military strength is a necessary guarantee for rapid development. In the Divine Ridge Mountains that stretches for thousands of miles, the only gaps that can be invaded by alien races in the true sense are actually the Evil Moon Mountains in the west, the Jackdaw Ridge in the middle, and the Golden Forest in the east where the elves live. If the powerful alien races mentioned in the memory fragments invaded the human kingdom from the east and west, at least the demons and elves would block the way and provide a buffer. Only the Jackdaw Ridge area of the Central Kingdom, aside from the scattered and savage evil orc tribes to the north, would leave Harvey's pioneer territory isolated on the front line of the alien invasion. The plan to expand southward was also urgent. Without a sufficient population to consume and provide productive forces, Harvey had no confidence in winning a protracted war. Even dealing with the vigilant gaze of the nobles and the church would be a struggle. At least we must bring the entire northern part of St. Valen under our rule and jurisdiction as soon as possible, Harvey concluded cautiously. Although the population of the north is less than 100,000, the land is flat and fertile, and the noble forces affiliated with the church are sparse. Besides, after we take over Sancha Town, a key river transportation point, it will be very convenient to go west or south, as Dallin said slowly. Then the only obstacle before us is the church. Harvey chuckled. Yes, before, I was still taking a wait-and-see attitude towards the conflict between the church and the Federation. But today, we have no choice but to take the initiative, stand completely on the side of the Federation, and eliminate all the church's influence in St. Valen. Pierce said seriously, My lord, should we send troops directly to Fingidun City? Or bypass Duke Ralph's garrison and raid Jinhu City, the capital of St. Valen? After assuming command of the entire army, Pierce's vision and command abilities vastly improved. No longer as reckless and short-sighted as before, he could already roughly anticipate his lord's intentions before Harvey could even propose a strategy. Bypass Fingidun City? I don't think that's necessary, Harvey laughed, slapping the Fingidun City area on the southern border map. Attack Fingidun City first, then head straight for Jinhu City. I'll push straight ahead, coordinating with the Federation's spellcaster forces deployed on the border of Danius to form a two-pronged attack on Grand Duke St. Valen. After quickly discussing and finalizing the new military expansion plan with the three men, Harvey, without even a moment's notice for lunch, hurried out to the alchemy laboratory. The alchemy laboratory, having undergone 3 renovations and expansions, was completely different from its predecessor. Adjacent to the magical weapons factory, a vast underground weapons testing ground had even been constructed. This was precisely the destination Harvey was heading to inspect and test a newly developed magical weapon. Due to Commander-in-Chief Pierce's busy military duties, Harvey assigned Captain Tommy, his personal guard, to operate and test the weapons. He wasn't allowed to use his bloodline abilities, so he could fully simulate the experience of ordinary soldiers using the new weapons. The underground weapons testing area was a vast rectangle, resembling an enclosed football field. At one end stood numerous large, brightly painted targets, and the ground was marked with rulers for calculating range. My lord, I'm ready. Captain Tommy stepped forward, touched his chest, and saluted Harvey. Harvey nodded and nodded at Chris, who had been clapping his hands. Chris immediately showed a smug expression and pulled back a bulging oilcloth beside him, revealing the new weapon beneath. Isn't this a new magic gun? Tommy and the surrounding personal guards were stunned. Compared to the long-handled magic gun made of a wooden handle and an iron pipe, the thing in front of him looked like a strangely shaped miniature magic-powered cannon. It was made entirely of pitch-black extremely cold iron, with a triangular bracket installed at the bottom. When standing upright, it was almost half a person's height. The barrel, which was also more than 1 meter long, was as thick as an adult's arm. The magic bullets that originally needed to be pressed one by one into a special magazine were now neatly hung on a long leather belt, with one end of the belt connected to the magazine position in front of the trigger of the gun body, which looked indescribable. "This new weapon has been named the monomachine gun by the Lord," Chris proudly explained, pointing to the weapon before him. "It uses the same ammunition as your everyday monomachine guns. But it needs to be mounted on this leather bandolier to be successfully fired." "Alright, I won't elaborate on the design principles and weapon structure. Soldiers don't need to understand it, just know how to operate it." Harvey, seeing Chris about to launch into another rant, quickly interrupted his precasting spree and beckoned Tommy, who looked bewildered, to come up and test the weapon. The captain of the guard carefully followed Harvey's instructions and sat down on the chair, fixed behind the monomachine gun. He then watched with a dazed look as the alchemy apprentices attached a long ammunition pouch to the gun. "Sir, how do I aim?" "There's no sight on this thing," Harvey chuckled and encouraged. "No need for sights. Just hold the trigger and shoot straight ahead." "Oh, okay," Tommy replied obediently. After Harvey stepped back, he immediately pulled the metal trigger at the rear of the machine gun. But what happened next was so strange that he couldn't believe his eyes. Chapter 388 Death Barrage. The moment Tommy pulled the trigger, the muzzle of the magical machine gun erupted in a continuous stream of flames. The jet of air was so turbulent that Tommy needed the strength of a bloodline warrior to steady his hands. The magical bullets on his belt, as if being pulled, were rapidly fed into the gun's connection. From the opening on the other side of the barrel, a stream of smoking bullets ricocheted, scattering to the ground with a clatter. A bullet landed right at the feet of Tommy's nearest personal guard. Confused, he crouched down to pick it up and examine it. As soon as his fingers grasped the bullet, he groaned and pulled it back, a bloody blister forming on his fingertips. Though this single weapon was firing in the entire testing area, its power and impact were even more terrifying than a squadron's volley. The piercing sound was nothing like the muffled sound of the magical gun, but rather resembled the detonation of a magical shell infused with dragonstone powder. Tommy didn't aim at the massive target 100 meters away. Instead, he followed Harvey's instructions and unleashed a barrage of bullets at a pile of sandbags about 10 meters ahead. The sandbags flew apart like rags, and the sands within them began to boil as if swept by a gust of wind. Unfortunately, the astonishing roar lasted only half a minute. The long line of bullets slid to the end, and even when the muzzle stopped spewing fire, Tommy remained stunned, still sitting behind the machine gun, his finger still frozen and firmly on the trigger. This is too terrible," the sharpshooter muttered. The guard who picked up the bullets but was burned just now was also confused. "Sir, why weren't these bullets fired?" "Instead, they fell out of the barrel." Chris glanced at him as if he were an idiot, and said speechlessly, "What bullets?" "These are shells. I see you are used to using magic bullets. This kind of fixed ammunition was used to make magic shells before." "Shells?" Tommy finally came to his senses after a long pause. After a moment's reflection, he exclaimed in surprise, "This thing is a split-body weapon? The bullet fires, but the casing remains. Doesn't that mean it can be reused?" "See? My captain of the guard is still smart," Harvey said with a satisfied smile. "Bullets made from a mixture of dragon flame powder and liquid magic energy will completely replace pure magic stone bullets in the future. This will not only ensure the weapon's penetrating power, but also enhance the bullet's damage spread." In the past, veterans like Tommy, when training and fighting with magic guns, often pursued extreme aiming accuracy. Because the inherent penetrating power of magic stone bullets meant that unless they hit the head or heart directly, they often couldn't kill the enemy on the spot. Many soldiers had experienced the embarrassing situation of a single shot piercing 4 or 5 human candied haws, only for the candied haws to continue their charge, roaring. After all, not everyone is a sharpshooter with a single shot. Even with a sufficient supply of ammunition, most soldiers still couldn't hit their target with 100% accuracy. However, the new fixed-charge bullets perfectly compensated for this shortcoming. Not only did they retain their penetrating power, but they also utilized the dragon flame powder's immense kinetic energy to extend their range. Upon impact, they inflicted amplified, diffuse, and burning damage within the enemy's body. Harvey's explanation immediately reminded everyone of the recent encounter with a massive monster at the outpost fortress. The artillery crew's single shell, though apparently only creating a bowl-sized hole in the creature's body, had penetrated and shattered its internal organs. Tommy slapped his head in frustration. "Oh no. I didn't have time to count how many rounds I fired," Chris said proudly. "No need to count. One ammo bag holds 250 of the new bullets. There's no pause in firing, and the whole process lasts half a minute." Harvey's personal guard lieutenant, T. Tao, stood nearby, touching his alchemical saber with a look of melancholy. He sighed. "Oh, these terrifying new weapons mean we bloodline warriors have no chance to show our mettle in close combat. Since being assigned to the Lord's personal guard, along with Tommy and the others, they have not only had to master aiming and shooting with rifles and revolvers, but also diligently practice close combat with cold weapons. After all, bullets will eventually run out, and malicious assassins might take advantage of the moment they're reloading to threaten the Lord's safety. If every member of the personal guard is equipped with one of these machine guns, we'll be confident we can blast even a high-level spellcaster to smithereens." Many of the personal guards agreed. "A bunch of idiots," Chris complained mercilessly. "Do you know how heavy this thing is? I know there are guys among you who have awakened the talent of great strength, but what about the others? Who is capable of carrying a machine gun weighing hundreds of pounds and serving by your side? This is obviously a standard heavy weapon that is to be popularized and equipped to the entire army, and its function is the same as that of a magic-powered cannon. How far can this thing fire? Will it be like a mana cannon, blasting the enemy to pieces before they can even see their faces?" Harvey explained with a smile. "Not really. A machine gun certainly doesn't have the range of a cannon. Its main advantage is speed and area damage. It's very effective at suppressing a group charge of a target enemy. It's at least several times more lethal than your volleys." Lieutenant Tito approached with a shameless face and whispered, "Sir, are the machine gun's fixed ammunition expensive, much cheaper than the magic stone bullets that use liquid mana? Then I want to try it too." After another flurry of gunfire, Tito's feet were piled with shiny, smoking metal shells. This time, he didn't dare to pick them up with his bare hands. Puffs of white smoke billowed from the barrel, and the tip could even be seen with a dark red tint from the smelting metal. Chris pointed at the red-hot muzzle and warned, "See? You can't use this thing indefinitely. After every 3 rounds, the barrel reaches its limit. You need to replace it with a spare barrel and let it cool down in turn, otherwise it will be useless." No one in the room spoke up. Everyone was lost in the shock of this new weapon. High-level alchemist Benoit, who had been silent, had a particularly complicated expression. Among those participating in today's weapon experiments, he was the only newcomer still a member of the Spellcaster Forum. He wasn't exactly Harvey's trusted henchman, but he was deeply grateful that the Lord had trusted him enough to allow him to observe the entire testing process. On the other hand, he was also filled with an indescribable sense of loss and disappointment. As an alchemist focused on magical research and experimentation, he was fine. But high-level spellcasters like the Eye of Illusion, the Astrologer, and even Mr. Duncan would probably be even more bewildered after learning of the power of this new weapon. What does it matter if one possesses exceptional wisdom and talent? What does it matter if one has diligently cultivated for decades to reach a higher rank? No matter how powerful one's original attack techniques are, or how agile one's flight is, there's no way to dodge the barrage of bullets so dense that even the naked eye can barely discern them. Facing dozens or even hundreds of these weapons simultaneously, the web of death they weave together could tear even a legendary spellcaster apart. Spellcasters have always prided themselves on pursuing the limits of truth, standing at the forefront of knowledge. But everything now tells Benoit a terrifying truth. It turns out we've fallen behind the times. Chapter 389 Advanced Elements. Ever since Ambach Kenny officially became the head of the livestock breeding team at the Ministry of Agriculture, no one dared to mock him by the nickname Shepherd Knight. His extensive experience in animal husbandry earned him the admiration of even the local wilderness folk, who had always looked down on the southern nobility, and they often addressed him as team leader Kenny. However, today, he wasn't facing the docile northern goats on the farm, but his furious wife, Sophia. After they had recently registered their marriage at the territory's city hall, Sophia, with her parents' consent, brought her soon-to-be adult brother, Ivan, to the frontier territory and enrolled him in the public school. Today, being a day off, the couple sat down with Ivan, who had returned from school, for a rare weekend dinner. Unfortunately, The warm and comfortable atmosphere was instantly shattered by Ivan's eloquent speeches about his future. Mage could only awkwardly lower his head and fiddle with the tender, braised lamb on his plate, leaving his poor brother-in-law to face his wife's wrath alone. Are you crazy? Ivan, I took great pains to bring you to the north, not to send you to join the army. Sophia changed from her usual gentleness and tranquility, and even the tone of her voice became much higher. With the knowledge you have learned in the past, it will be easy for you to become one of the top students in the territory school. When you graduate successfully from the advanced teaching department, you can enter the city hall as an apprentice manager, or be luckier and be selected by the Spellcaster Academy and have the opportunity to become a distinguished spellcaster. Which one is not more promising than joining the Northern Army? Ivan listened to his sister's scolding patiently, and insisted with his next if, that's not my wish. You should have known very well when you were in my hometown that becoming an honorable knight is my lifelong dream. Sophia glared and said, but there are no knights in the frontier territory. Look at your brother-in-law, he was indeed a knight in the past, but what about him now? If he hadn't been lucky, he would have died in a daze on the battlefield. Mage, who was suddenly dragged into the debate, shuddered and quickly stood up and laughed dryly. I'll go to the kitchen to get some more soup. Brother-in-law, those are knights from the old era. I want to be a knight from the new era. The more Ivan argued with his sister, the more excited he became. Sister, you have no idea how popular the military is with students every time they come to school to give promotional speeches. Soldiers fighting for justice and fairness, an army belonging to the people. Loyalty to the Lord who always guides us on the right path. This is the knight of the new era. The junior teaching department where Sophia worked didn't have much overlap with the senior teaching department where Ivan studied. Naturally, she didn't know what they were learning or experiencing every day. What? The military will come to your place to give speeches, of course. Those who come to preach are officers who have truly experienced life and death battles. Conquering the greedy former Earl Figan, resisting the unjust invasion of the church, traveling to Sancher Town to rescue and support refugees in the south, and the deeds of sheltering infected refugees after the outbreak of the plague not long ago. Sophia's expression eased a little, and she muttered, what's so interesting about cruel and bloody war stories? If you want to know, you might as well ask your brother-in-law. He also participated in the battle outside the Raven Ridge. Mage, who was holding the bowl of soup, twitched his face when he heard this, and said with a wry smile, I was the enemy of the Pioneer Territory at that time. And I didn't understand what was going on at all. They just gathered in a charging formation, and then they were blown into pieces by the Lord's magic cannon with a bang. Sophia rolled her eyes at her husband and patiently advised, Ivan, not only me, but also father and mother have high hopes for you. We all hope that you can enter the Spellcaster Academy in the future, or at least become a trainee official in the city hall. She thought for a moment and began to persuade her brother. Becoming a spellcaster is equivalent to touching the door to wisdom and truth. Think about it. Even the Lord himself is a noble spellcaster. Ivan was not moved at all, shaking his head like a rattle. I don't care. The military will soon come to the advanced teaching department to recruit a group of outstanding students to join the army. No matter what, I will try my best to win. Sophia was so angry that her eyebrows stood up. She turned to look at her honest-looking husband and said sadly, my dear, please persuade Ivan too. Mage put down his knife and fork, sighed, and said, if you ask me, Ivan's choice wasn't wrong. The Lord has said, the people hold the greatest strength and hope. Whether spellcasters or soldiers, we all come from the people and serve the people. There's essentially no difference between the two. Furthermore, a highly educated young man like Ivan, specially conscripted into the army, wouldn't risk his life on the battlefield like the traditional knights under the command of noble lords. Military exercises, often conducted along the glacial river, were open to public viewing, and Mage had attended several of them. The terrifying cannons that could shatter targets from thousands of meters away, the magical weapons that allowed for no pause between shots, the soldiers didn't even need to engage the enemy in close combat, simply slaying their targets from afar without a single blow. Ivan said in surprise, brother-in-law, you agree with my choice? I am so happy. He stood up, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and said excitedly, sister and brother-in-law, thank you for your hospitality today. I am very full. If you have anything to do, please leave first. Wait? What can a student like you do so late at night? Sophia asked puzzledly. You are not going to sneak into the chess and card room with your classmates to have fun, right? Ivan, I will not allow you to be so decadent. Ivan laughed and said, "What? Sister, you underestimate me. I joined a student organization. We have activities in the auditorium on weekends." Student organization? Why have I never heard of it? Sword and Shield Brotherhood. It is an unofficial organization developed by the military and schools. The targets of development are young students with excellent grades and absolute loyalty to the Lord. They may also be recruited into the military in the future. The military contacts students in school. They've even formed an organization. Ambriki also felt a little strange and asked, "Are they just trying to identify talented military recruits? But you've only been in the territory for a short time, how could they have taken notice? HMPH. Are you looking down on me? I'm an advanced individual," Ivan said indignantly as he walked towards the door. The Brotherhood advocates the idea of being prepared for danger in times of peace. We are highly vigilant against any hostile targets that might threaten the territory's development in the future, whether it's the Southern Nobility, the Church of Light, the fellow orcs, or any unknown enemy that hasn't bared its fangs yet. He thought for a moment, chuckled, and added, "You won't understand even if I tell you. The Lord may personally meet with us soon. Just wait and see." With that, he gently closed the door and hurried away without looking back. Ambriki and Sophia exchanged a stunned glance, each question surfacing in their minds. Why would the Lord play such a charade with his young students, creating so many imaginary enemies for himself? Chapter 390, North-South Connection. At the foot of Jackdaw Ridge, less than a mile from the underground base on the south slope, lies a valley. The once densely vegetated and rocky ground has been completely cleared, and countless gravels, mixed with cement mortar, have been evenly paved to create a wide road leading straight down to the pioneer territory below. At the end of this road, extending towards the mountain, lie two massive caves, each 10 meters in diameter, clearly man-made. Entering the caves doesn't immediately lead to darkness. Every few meters along the smooth, flat ceiling, a massive illuminating magic stone is placed. Finger-thick metal energy pipes run along the entire length of the ceiling, evenly connecting all the magic stones and providing them with a constant supply of lighting energy. This is the tunnel project Harvey ordered, which took so much time to complete, a tunnel that cuts directly through the Jackdaw Ridge Mountains, connecting Pioneer Territory and Jackdaw Town from north to south. The entire mountain tunnel is over 3,000 meters long. The living shield machine, working day and night while dragging a focused energy array, took a full month to complete, finally opening it a week ago. All reinforcement work and auxiliary repairs within the tunnel were handled by hundreds of flexible climbing multi-legged alchemists. These new alchemists are an upgraded version of the previous wolf spider beasts, and are extremely efficient in handling dangerous operations at high altitudes and underground. After all, in an era of such backward construction technology, it was impossible for Harvey to easily dig several straight, orderly, multi-lane modern traffic tunnels like in his previous world. The Ministry of Construction strictly followed Harvey's instructions, using miniature wolf spider beasts to enter Jackdaw Ridge through cracks in the mountain. They discovered several natural caves and then used the living shield machine to carefully connect and open them, resulting in the winding through the mountain tunnel we see today. This alone has been hailed as an incredible miracle by the people of the territory. With the successful completion of this amazing project, the Ministry of Construction now has detailed data for calculation and reference for subsequent tunnel excavation work in the Eastern Basin, and its construction experience has also been enriched. My lord, I still don't understand. Construction Minister Haru still looked dusty and stood shoulder to shoulder with Harvey at the entrance of the cave. Why do we have to dig two parallel mountain tunnels with exactly the same size? Harvey chuckled and explained, what's so difficult to understand? It's just dividing the lanes, different lanes. Haru was stunned and muttered to himself, aren't the war beast vehicles and magic vehicles the only ones that can quickly pass through such a long mountain tunnel? Do they have to separate and take a separate lane? Captain Tommy of the guard came over and answered with a smile, maybe one lane is specially used for alchemical vehicles, and the other lane is for people to walk. Walk? My god, this tunnel is 5 or 6 miles long. An engineering team leader who had just come to report to Harvey wiped the dust off his face and frowned. Although it is 100 times easier than crossing the Jackdaw Ridge, it is not an easy task to travel through it on foot. At least you need to ride a horse or drive. Harvey stood aside, smiling silently, waiting for the crowd to gather and discuss, speculating on the specific differences and respective functions of the two parallel tunnels. Two large alchemical camels slowly approached the construction site. The industrial parks director emerged from the vehicles, approaching Harvey and bowing. "Lord, the first batch of iron track samples has arrived. We can now arrange for trial installation." Harvey nodded, and a group of workers in gray uniforms immediately stepped forward, carefully lifting and stacking the long, rectangular metal objects pulled by the camels onto the ground. "Minecart tracks." Harry recognized a pile of thick iron bars before him. "Lord, you're planning to lay minecart tracks in the tunnel?" There aren't any mineral veins in this mountain." Before Harvey could patiently explain, the experienced construction director immediately noticed that the tracks were clearly of the wrong size and specifications. They were also made of ironclad wood, unlike the tracks found in the mines. Pure steel rails, no wonder they needed a zipline to load and unload. Harry found the Lord's wastefulness unbelievable. If so much refined steel had been used to forge weapons and alchemical beast carriers, who knows how much production could have increased. Yet, they were inexplicably turning it into rails of unknown use. Who wouldn't be tempted to sneer at this extravagance and waste? "The Ministry of Construction will first cooperate with the Ministry of Industry to complete the laying of a roughly 500-meter section of track," Harvey ordered bluntly, not intending to elaborate. "With the cooperation of the alchemical beasts, I believe you can complete it within a week at the earliest. Then, we can begin testing the track's stability and load-bearing capacity." The Ministry of Construction and the Ministry of Industry exchanged a glance, both looking bewildered. When it came to some of Harvey's marvelous inventions, the vast production management departments of the entire frontier territory had absolutely no way of unraveling the details. Although they were already accustomed to the Lord's extraordinary methods, the idea of laying tracks made of refined steel in a mountain tunnel still made the two department heads feel uneasy. What was the difference between this and paving a road with real gold and silver? If the other production departments, which were always short of raw steel, knew about this, they would be beaten to death as spendthrifts. In fact, only the frontier territory of the Mage Lord Harvey could afford the luxury of paving roads with refined steel rails. Since the widespread use of blast furnace cast iron steel making technology, the steel manufacturing industry, the cornerstone of the frontier territory's industrial development, has finally completely moved away from the primitive workshop hammered forging method. Coupled with the territory's mine's endless output of high-quality iron ore, the frontier territory's steel production has reached a terrifying level. The amount of steel produced in a single month is several times greater than the total output of all the cities in the central part of the southern continent combined. But to Harvey, this was all natural. Wasn't it normal for the industrialized production concepts and technology he brought from his past life to surpass those of the handmade weapon workshops owned by nobles and princes? As for the tracks that needed to be laid in the tunnel for load-bearing tests, they were also advanced preparations to verify Harvey's subsequent plans. Simply drilling a hole through the mountain to achieve a north-south connection wouldn't yield significant benefits or convenience. What Harvey truly wanted was to connect Grizzly Castle, Jackdaw Town, the frontier territory, and then to the east bank of the ice-filled river, finally reaching the undeveloped eastern basin, all connected by rail, forming a complete railway line. Chapter 391 Magic Power Train, Part 1. The days when the snow melts and the rivers thaw often feel even more bone-chilling than the snowy depths of winter. Harvey spent the better part of a day preparing himself mentally before finally trudging out of the warmth and comfort of the Lord's castle. He led a group of high-ranking officials from the frontier territory by cart to the site of the newly completed construction project. This facility, which Harvey named the train station, was built outside the territory's walls. Two tracks, resembling miniature tracks, passed along one side of the structure, one leading to the territory's mines and the other to a tunnel at the foot of Jackdaw Ridge. Aside from the Ministry of Construction and the Ministry of Industry, officials from other administrative departments had no idea what the Lord was up to. The officials assigned from Grizzly Castle were particularly stunned. The steel tracks, lined with crushed stone and wooden sleepers, appeared perfectly uniform. Even those who hadn't anticipated the Lord's intentions of extending the miniature tracks beyond the territory were impressed by the magnanimity of the project. Fine steel rails. Good heavens! Such a luxury, Your Majesty, the territory truly is. No, our frontier territory's financial resources are truly immense. A murmur of discussion erupted from the crowd, punctuated by a few barely suppressed exclamations of amazement. Only Harvey himself understood the sheer difficulty of laying the track from the mining area through the territory and on to the mountain tunnel in just a month and a half. Due to an overestimation of the Ministry of Industry's rail production efficiency and the Ministry of Construction's lack of track-laying technology, the entire railway line was truly capable of carrying trains only from the mining area to the territory, a distance of less than 10 miles. The section from the territory to the Jackdaw Ridge Mountain Tunnel had only been partially completed with a roadbed and sleepers laid. No track had been laid at all. As a liberal arts time traveler who knew a thing or two about everything, Harvey had no idea of the difference in load carrying capacity between wide and narrow gauge rails. He simply, in the spirit of economy, settled on a crude, standard gauge of 1.2 meters. The crushed stone used for the roadbed was primarily derived from the slag produced at the mining area. This material had accumulated into several small hills at the mining site, serving no other purpose than paving the road. The railroad sleepers were cut and shipped directly from the logging area. Judging by their size and appearance, they resembled the old railroad sleepers Harvey had seen in his previous life. Of course, Harvey had gathered everyone here today, braving the bitter cold, not just to see the fine steel tracks. The groundbreaking steel tracks were just the appetizer. The real showpiece was, of course, the equipment that actually ran on them. At Harvey's signal, the technicians from the Ministry of Industry removed the massive tarpaulin shed at the end of the tracks, revealing a dark steel-wheeled vehicle sprawled on the tracks. "My lord, isn't this a warbeast vehicle?" Earl Fagin was a little unsure, but from its appearance, this iron object certainly resembled the magical vehicles he had ridden every time he visited the wasteland, capable of crossing mountains and hills. "This isn't a warbeast. Look, it has no legs. Its lower body is completely replaced by a row of wheels. I guess it can only travel on flat ground." Duarte, the vice president of the Spellcaster Academy, shook his head in denial. The difference between the two was obvious. Arturo, the president of the academy, interrupted the two men's argument. "I think this is a giant alchemical beast transformed from a macrophagous worm. Look at its head. Isn't it as sharp as a living tunnel boring machine? I guess it's a new type of excavation equipment." Harvey listened to the discussion for a while, smiled helplessly, and shook his head. It was no wonder that everyone was speculating. The design and construction of the locomotive before him were entirely in accordance with Harvey's instructions. The sharp front was purely to satisfy his personal preference for streamlined design, not to reduce wind resistance. After all, this train powered by magic cores could not travel at high speeds. Judging from the quality of the track laying and the body dynamic design, it was even inferior to the green train he had ridden in his previous life. The fact that these higher-ranking officials casually speculated about the practicalities of alchemical beasts and magical devices was welcome news to Harvey. It signified that both ordinary people and spellcasters were becoming accustomed to the widespread development of magical technology and recognized the role of alchemical artifacts and magic in boosting productivity. This marked a shift from passively accepting Harvey's indoctrination to actively innovating and innovating. "This is a groundbreaking transportation vehicle," Harvey said, interrupting the debate. "I've named it a magic power train. It's currently in the experimental testing phase. After all, it was a product of the scientific and technological advancements he had brought with him from his past life. Although the power source had been magically modified from coal, oil, and electricity to a magical power core infused with liquid mana, Harvey stubbornly insisted on retaining the classic train name. "Train, car," Chris muttered to himself in some confusion. "Sir, this thing is completely powered by the power core. It can't catch fire at all." The chief alchemist under Harvey is a master of playing with fire. He uses a special fuel made from dragon flame powder and liquid magic energy, which is widely used to enhance the power of various magic weapons. Harvey was too lazy to explain and said directly, "Anyway, just call it a train. It will be the key to solving our transportation problems in the future." Reiner, who had been silent all this time, suddenly raised his hand and slapped his head. The mechanical palm and the metal head rubbed against each other, producing a string of sparks. "I see. You plan to build a railway like this between the territory and the eastern basin that will be developed soon, and then use fire trains to quickly transport manpower and materials between the two places." Police Chief Yurio scratched his head in confusion and asked, "Then why do you have to build a railway? Anyway, it looks like a bicycle or a moped, with wheels. Can't it run directly on the dirt road?" The Minister of Industry, who was in charge of casting the locomotive, stepped forward at Harvey's signal and explained, "It's a weight problem, Mr. Superintendent. Do you know how heavy this thing is? Even if you send all the mechanically modified police officers in the police department, they can't lift this steel locomotive weighing several tons. The main reason why a train cannot travel freely on ordinary roads like other vehicles is its huge size and terrifying weight, which far exceeds the carrying capacity of any road surface. Even on solid concrete, let alone dirt roads, the train would suffer severe damage, potentially leading to rollovers and other safety issues. The design of the rails not only disperses the weight of the train on the ground, but also allows it to travel at high speeds, seemingly as if on flat ground. Once the Ministry of Industry's manufacturing technology matures, there's room for further speed increases. After all, it currently only has a single power core, making it a crude single-cylinder model. Alright. Instead of talking endlessly here, why don't you all come with me to the front of the train and experience it for yourself? Harvey clapped his hands and took the lead. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Magic Power Train, Part 2. A throng of territorial officials scrambled to follow Harvey aboard the train. Since the cockpit could only accommodate a few people, most were confined to an open rear carriage, eagerly leaning over the edges as they waited for the train to officially start. Due to the magic modification of the power source, the locomotive's structure differed slightly from the antique steam locomotives of Harvey's previous life. The front half housed the driver's cab, offering excellent visibility, while the rear comprised the magical power core and transmission. This meant that operating this massive transport vehicle required the cooperation of at least 2 professionally trained drivers. At Harvey's gesture, the honor of inaugurating the magically powered train was handed to the Ministers of Industry and Construction, a gesture of encouragement for their collaborative efforts in achieving this historic feat. As the liquid magic energy tanks were inserted into the power core, many of the spellcasting officials and advisors present immediately sensed a massive surge of magical energy emanating from the rear of the locomotive. Upon receiving the message that the power core had activated, Construction Minister Harvey, standing in the driver's cab, immediately used his sturdy arms to forcefully pull down the train's brake lever. With a rumbling sound, the train body trembled violently, causing many on board to stumble and nearly fall. Harvey then immediately pulled a second lever, releasing the train's deceleration mechanism. The sharp clatter of iron wheels against steel rails filled the air, and the train slowly began to move along the tracks before the eyes of the crowd. For a moment, both the lord in the driver's cab and the officials crammed into the lone open-top carriage at the rear of the train felt a chill rush in their faces, causing them to shudder. After all, the system was still in its experimental, semi-finished stage. The driver's cab didn't even have a windshield, let alone the pitiful open-top carriage at the rear. During the design process, Harvey had simplified countless technical details that he hadn't fully understood. The train's driver's cab only provided the basic functions of starting, decelerating, and braking, and a dedicated co-pilot was required to constantly monitor the power core and provide timed water cooling. The entire transmission system is a direct copy of an enlarged armored icebreaker, with a cast metal crankshaft driving the wheels at breakneck speed, creating a relentless clanging noise once underway. From the perspective of a modern time traveler, this bargain version of the magic train is plagued by flaws. All vital components are rigged and welded together, and braking even requires the incredible force of a capstan. The entire cab and power module are welded directly to the train's chassis, devoid of any dampening devices, ensuring the driver and passengers experience the intense vibrations of the train's operation. Furthermore, the train is completely devoid of communication systems, requiring the front and rear crew members to communicate entirely through their hoarse voices over the train's roar. There are no electrical systems for lighting or heating, and once the train reaches speed, the driver, standing at the front, relies solely on visual observation. In winter, they tremble in unison with the train, relying solely on their physical strength to withstand the chilling wind. Of course, now that the train is running, having first solved the initial problems, the existing flaws and drawbacks will naturally be gradually improved. Lord, how much cargo can this train haul at once? Reiner and Harvey stood together in the cab, feeling the metal parts of their bodies vibrate and rub violently with the train. Compared to armored icebreakers, that's a huge difference. Don't be fooled by the fact that the locomotive is only pulling one car now. Once it's officially operational, It can connect to at least 8 cars, capable of hauling a cargo equivalent to that required by more than a dozen icebreakers, although icebreakers don't require sails for propulsion and still rely on power cores for energy. The hull itself is still limited by its draft, making it far inferior to trains running on solid ground. As he spoke, he turned his head and asked everyone to look at the energy compartment behind the cab. We are still in the testing phase and have only equipped the train with 1 energy core. If all subsequent tests go smoothly, one train originally has reserved space for 4 energy cores. The alchemical life calculated the full cargo capacity of this train in almost half a second, and said in an incredible tone, it can pull the cargo capacity of 40 or 50 ironclad ships at a time? This is incredible. The entire pioneering territory currently has less than 10 ironclad ships. Except for 2 military ships that need to travel between the territory and the outpost, the rest are all docked at the Grizzly Fort Wharf in the south. They are responsible for continuously transporting refugees affected by the war in the southern part of the Principality from Sancher Town to the north day and night, but the efficiency is still not excellent. As Harvey's chief administrator, Reiner immediately began to consider the possibility of extending the railway through the tunnels of Jackdaw Ridge all the way to Jackdaw Town in the south, and then to Grizzleburg, or even more ambitiously, running the train directly to Sancher Town, already overcrowded with refugees. Before he could continue his thoughts, Earl Fagan's voice trembled. Sir, then, what is the maximum operating speed of this train? Could it be faster than the sailless ironclad ships sailing downstream? Sancher Town was currently under the leadership of Trevor, Earl Fagan's nephew, the new mayor. With Harvey's full support, he diligently planned and coordinated the reception and transportation of the population. Although the young noble mayor possessed a chivalrous spirit and tried his best to treat the refugees fairly and kindly, the ironclad ship's transport efficiency still left him feeling overwhelmed. Sancher Town was almost completely overwhelmed by the refugees stranded there. If it weren't for the constant influx of scarce food and medicine from the north, widespread famine and epidemics would have long since broken out. Harvey pondered for a moment, then replied cautiously, "We've only installed 1 power core so far, so the speed is about what you're seeing right now. When it's officially operational, I can only guarantee it'll be at least twice as fast as a sailless ironclad ship." In the eyes of these southern nobles, the ironclad ship was already a groundbreaking high-speed transportation tool. Before then, this world's land and water transportation relied primarily on sailboats and horse-drawn carriages. On uneven dirt roads, or relying on wind and human paddling, the efficiency was incredibly low. Harvey watched the stunned silence of the crowd and couldn't help but chuckle. This magically modified train, whose top speed probably couldn't even reach 30 kilometers per hour, was already the fastest transport vehicle in the world in their eyes. If he could reach speeds closer to 50 or 60 kilometers per hour after upgrading the power core, their jaws would surely drop. Of course, with only manual braking, he didn't dare attempt to push the train to maximum speed. After all, running was easy, but stopping it would be difficult. Chapter 393 Intelligence Network. In the capital of St. Valen, a street-side apartment in Jinhu City. It was the weekly intelligence exchange day again. The secret policeman of the Pioneer Territory, codenamed 007, leaned against the window, gazing out at the street, quietly awaiting the report from his independently developed intelligence subordinates. Ever since the outbreak of the corruption blight years ago, Jinhu City has suffered a massive exodus of the city's population. Not only have many perished, but many fled. Many residents who once had modest means have been forced to deplete their fortunes and even go into debt in order to pray to the church for a life-saving potion. After finally controlling the blight, conflict erupted with the neighboring kingdom of Daius. The princes and nobles, led by His Majesty the Grand Duke, launched a new round of temporary taxation and forced labor, shrouding the entire capital and surrounding areas in a gloomy situation. With the arrival of winter, the city's residents suffered widespread food and clothing shortages. Even with the capital's gates sealed, famine-stricken refugees from the surrounding areas found ways to sneak in. This led to a surge in crime, forcing even the city guards, usually preoccupied with extorting protection fees from merchants, to rev up their efforts and begin apprehending the criminals. The nobles and wealthy merchants showed little concern for the lives of the common people. To prevent crime from spreading to the inner city, where they lived, the gates were closed and the curfew was moved forward to the evening before sunset. This forced 007 to gather his informants in the lower city early. After all, His current disguise made it difficult to appear in the streets of the city, which was rife with the poor and gangs. The first person to arrive at his rented apartment was Jarl Austin, commonly known as the Anvil, Iron Anvil, a native of Jinhu City, had been swept north by the infected refugees fleeing the city, only to be taken in and treated by the Pioneer Territory. When he encountered criminals and opportunists among the refugees, he was the first to speak out against their shameless actions, resolutely defending the interests of both his savior and the refugees themselves. 007 opened the apartment door, stepped aside to allow his intelligence agent to enter the room, and, after a careful eyeing of the man, asked with interest, "Have you lost all your money?" "I'm still trying." Iron Anvil rubbed his hands awkwardly, then hesitated. "Sir, I simply don't understand. There are so many ways to gather information. Why do you insist on making me go to the casino every day and deliberately lose money?" Every 3 days, his superior would hand him a heavy purse and order him to roam the city's casinos, impersonating a gambling-addicted upstart who squandered his money. "Oh? Do you find it difficult to do something as simple as losing money?" "Not that it's difficult, but for some reason these past few days, my luck has been ridiculously good. No matter how I bet, I always win." Teashan scratched his head, his face showing bitterness. "If this continues, my principal will be more than the amount of funding you gave me." 007 couldn't help laughing when he heard it, and stood up to pour him a glass of warm water. "It's just a temporary change of luck." "So, during this time in the casino, have you met anyone who took the initiative to talk to you and make friends?" Teashan nodded and began to report on his work in detail. "On the nights when I lost a lot, the people who came to talk to me were some gang members, some loan sharks, and some secretly inquired about my identity and background. But the casinos I often go to are the gray industries of a certain baron. The more I lose, the more the other party cares about protecting my personal safety." "Well, tell me more about how you've been killing it at the gambling table these days," Teashan said awkwardly. "I've been sitting in a private room with a man who's clearly dressed like an aristocrat for 2 days straight. He seems to have sucked all my bad luck out of me, and every time he comes, he sits below me, and I've lost everything." As he spoke, he fished a solid gold pocket watch from his inner jacket pocket and handed it to his boss. "Here, this is the watch he pawned with me after losing all his money last night. Before he left, he swore to me not to sell it and that he was going to win it back tonight." 007 took the solid gold pocket watch, snapped the cover open, and his eyes narrowed. A lifelike eagle head was vividly engraved on the inner case. "Find an opportunity to continue gambling with him at the same table tonight and try to figure out his identity and background." 007 thought for a moment and made a cautious arrangement. "I can just follow him or sneak into his residence." "Would that be more convenient?" 007 sighed and sneered. "Don't take your life lightly. Tracking undercover agents, going deep into the enemy to gather information is dangerous, time-consuming and laborious. The benefits are completely disproportionate to the effort." He paused and said seriously, "You must remember that it is not easy to train a secret policeman. What we have to do is to bribe, infiltrate and win over. Not everyone can be bribed. Those knights who talk about righteousness and morality are especially difficult," Anvil commented stubbornly. 007 took a sip of hot water, chuckled and said, "So, if you learn to collect information, distinguish true from false, and hide your identity, you can be called a qualified secret police." He pinched the pocket watch in his hand and showed the eagle head emblem inside to Anvil. "If I say that this gold watch represents an important intelligence message, do you believe it?" Anvil blushed and said hesitantly, "Sir, I can't tell." "Frost-winged eagle, the family emblem of Duke Ralph." 007 pointed to the pattern on the inside of the watch cover. The eagle head faces left, representing the Duke's bloodline. "Your gambling friend is the nephew of Duke Ralph." Anvil was so shocked that he immediately stood up from his chair and said in a trembling voice, "I am gambling at the same table with the nephew of a founding duke. No wonder he is more generous than me. Come to think of it, it's not uncommon for a luxurious casino owned by a royal noble to be frequented by gamblers of other noble status. When it comes to their unhealthy habits of drinking, whoring, and gambling, there seems to be little difference between nobles and commoners." 007 returned the gold watch to Teashan and patiently gave him a few words of advice before escorting him out. Shortly after closing the door, he immediately locked the apartment door and the study door, gently closed the open curtains, and then carefully pulled a suitcase from under the bed and took out an exquisitely crafted brass typewriter. Codename 007, at 091, 088, 085, A noble suspected of being Duke Ralph's direct descendant has appeared in the royal capital. Please quickly determine whether the Duke is still in Invade City. 007's speculation wasn't groundless. As the head of trade for the Pharaoh's Royal Chamber of Commerce in Jinhu City, he mingled with the capital's upper echelons of nobles and wealthy merchants, possessing a keen eye for all sorts of secret intelligence. Rumors abounded that Grand Duke St. Valen was deeply wary of the family of the current Duke Ralph. While the Duke publicly sided with the royal family, in reality, close interaction between the two sides was rare. The presence of the Duke's direct descendants in Jinhu City undoubtedly raised a possibility. After suffering such a terrifying assassination attempt from afar, had the Duke himself been terrified and secretly sought refuge in the capital? He didn't wait long before seeing two lines of text slowly appear on the crystal screen of the brass typewriter, perfectly confirming 007's suspicions. Codename 088, at 007, Duke Ralph departed for his hunting fort in the mountains 10 days ago. We haven't yet determined his exact return date, possibly due to the assassination attempt. However, the Duke's family remains in Invade City. As expected. He left his wife and children at his hometown as a pretext and secretly hid in the capital to save his life. Chapter 394 Pre-War Assembly. The strict curfew in Jinhu City was no match for the cryptanalytic network communications flowing between the two regions. Harvey's secret police quickly collated and analyzed the intelligence almost immediately upon receiving it. Before nightfall, the compiled intelligence documents arrived on Harvey's desk. According to the Frontier Territory Security Bureau's work regulations, top secret and urgent intelligence is marked in red. Personnel stationed 24/7 at the cryptanalytic brain are responsible for receiving it and delivering it directly to their immediate superior, Asdarin, who then promptly notifies the Lord. Intelligence documents marked in blue are generally classified as important and non-urgent. After being collated and analyzed by intelligence personnel for authenticity and content, they are then delivered to Harvey's office along with reports from other departments. This intelligence document, sent back from Jinhu City, was clearly stamped with a blue seal. Duke Ralph has actually fled. The snipers and high-level mages he had sent hadn't even scratched him, yet they had managed to terrify a founding duke. Harvey immediately summoned Pierce, Reiner, and Asdalin, and with a mixture of laughter and tears, he presented the intelligence to them. Tisk, what a coward, he's abandoned his own fiefdom and even abandoned some of his family as a cover to confuse the assassins. He didn't think his attackers were still hiding in Invade City for so long, did he? I had planned to attack Invade City after the spring. Harvey felt his plans were disrupted. Winter was drawing to a close, and the Pioneer Territory was embarking on a series of important development projects. The development of the Eastern Basin required his personal attention, as did the construction of trains and railways. He had thought that after this incident, Duke Ralph would retreat to his own lair for a while, allowing him to deal with him when he was done. But he hadn't expected him to flee. It was truly unexpected. After reading the intelligence, Pierce said with ecstasy, "My lord, this way we don't have to wait until spring. While the Duke is quietly running away with his elite troops, Invade City must be short of troops right now. Why not, running to Jinhu City for refuge just because he is afraid of death? I'm afraid that's not Duke Ralph's only purpose." As Dallin pondered for a moment and analyzed, "I guess he will exaggerate the rear threat we bring to the principality and try his best to lobby the Grand Duke and the Church to turn around and deal with us with all their strength." In fact, speculation in this regard has long been confirmed. Whether it is the intelligence about the conflict between the Church and the Federation that Harvey learned from the Spellcaster Forum, or the large amount of trivial information collected by the secret police from the front lines of the conflict, it is clearly mentioned that the coalition forces of St. Valen and the Church used a large number of alchemical weapons and divine equipment when fighting the Federation at the border of Days. The Alchemy Quest Society, having consistently sided with the Union, naturally couldn't sell its weapons to the Church. Therefore, these divine instruments, which required the control of Church priests and the Inquisitors, must have originated in the holy city of Gorus. This also suggests that the Church has been secretly accumulating strength and planning for a long time to reignite the war of faith with spellcasters. The news of the former Earl Fagin's defeat and death at your hands has spread throughout the duchy, as Dallin chuckled disdainfully. Duke Ralph probably believes that the weapons we possess are equally powerful as those in the Church's arsenal, and that by summoning reinforcements from the Church, revenge for the assassination will be easy. Most likely for this purpose, Harvey clapped his hands and instructed his three direct subordinates, "In that case, We must act without delay and dispatch our troops to Fingigan City immediately. Sir, please give the order. Pierce, who had been waiting for Harvey to speak, immediately stood up and saluted. The 3 battalions of the Northern Army, totaling 1,500 men, will immediately enter combat readiness, Harvey declared gravely. Complete the main force assembly tonight and depart early tomorrow morning. He paused, then added, you may first borrow 5 transport ironclad vessels from Sancha Town, along with 10 mana-powered cannons. I'll discuss the specific logistical arrangements with Reiner. Each ironclad vessel possessed 2 fore and aft cannons. With these 10 mana-powered cannons, with sufficient ammunition, the Northern Army could even bombard the entire city from the Fingigan City docks to the gates of Duke Ralph's residence. Understood. I'll arrange it right away. Pierce gave a standard chest-beating military salute and happily departed. Harvey's territorial army now numbered a full 5,000 men. In addition to the over 1,000 recruits recruited this year for military expansion, the internal defense forces comprised 3 battalions with 1,500 men, and the external combat forces comprised 5 battalions with 2,500 men. The Army's standard weaponry, one long and one short, replaced older models. Ammunition reserves were plentiful, and daily shooting drills were conducted at the new recruit training range. The new repeating magic rifles, the newly deployed magic machine guns, and the long-range magic cannons combined created a formidable firepower for a battalion of 500 men. They could easily hold down thousands of fearless fell orcs in the trenches of a fortress. Furthermore, thanks to widespread literacy education within the army, the majority of soldiers possessed a literacy level far superior to that of ordinary people of their time. Furthermore, under the deliberate guidance of Harvey and Arsterlin, the military continuously recruited young officer reserves from the territory's public colleges. A general staff composed of mid- and upper-level officers within the Northern Army had taken shape, significantly improving the efficiency of executing combat orders. Whenever a combat order was issued from Harvey, dedicated personnel would immediately begin intensively preparing logistical support, allocating food, weapons, ammunition, and other related matters based on the combat plan and the number of combatants. For a foreign operation like today's, involving 3 battalions and 1,500 men, logistics could be seamlessly arranged in just one night. Compared to noble lords who would march in the spring, recruiting knights, mercenaries, and procuring weapons and supplies before winter arrived, this was truly a groundbreaking, high-speed war engine. Lord, the Eye of Illusion rushed into Harvey's living room. Almost as he was about to fall asleep, his neck stiff. Why don't you let me and the astrologer participate in this combat operation? The Eye of Illusion looked a little excited. We went to Fingigan City just because of the assassination attempt that threatened the Duke last time, and, think about the noble spellcasters under Duke Ralph. They are also high-level wizards who pose a great threat to ordinary soldiers. If we hadn't taken action to contain and resist them, the soldiers would probably suffer unnecessary casualties. Harvey rolled his eyes and had already prepared a statement to shut the other party up. Duke Ralph fled to the capital of Jinhu City and took away all his powerful direct confidants, including the 2 high-level wizards you mentioned. The Eye of Illusion immediately looked depressed and muttered, I'm a combat mage. I can't go out to fight, and staying in the territories really. Those experimental maniacs in the academy don't like me at all. Harvey looked at him pretending to be pitiful and couldn't help but complain in his heart. How could Ms. Astrologer get along well with others and even join a magic experiment group? You don't have to be so discouraged. This is also the request of your teacher, Mr. Duncan. Harvey stood up and pushed open the window. He has already taken the initiative to ask me to take you, Ms. Astrologer, and some spellcasters from the Academy of Sciences to explore the unknown land further north and try to find out the details of the powerful enemy from the core of the continent. After all, their real powerful enemy in the future comes from the distant and unknown north. Chapter 395, Expedition. At first light, the piercing call of the assembly whistle rang out from the temporary garrison camp at Grizzly Fort. Benny jumped up from his cot, swiftly donned his uniform, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and trotted out of the barracks to assemble. Their battalion had already completed the March assembly and mobilization meeting the previous day. Now, they only had to follow their superiors' orders, follow the main force to the dock, and then board the ironclad ships anchored there to depart south. The weather was still bitterly cold, and the Grizzly Fort dock was already filled with soldiers standing in silent formation, all of them carrying marching packs and rifles, like a field of javelins standing in the cold wind. Not only were the Northern Army on this expedition, But a large number of logistics personnel were also busy at the dock, directing the alchemy beasts to hoist large amounts of logistical supplies, weapons, and ammunition onto the ships. Despite the large number of people, the order was excellent and there was no sign of chaos. One by one, the soldiers filed onto the ship. When it was Benny's squad's turn, he couldn't help but swallow nervously. The spectacle before him made the rookie, who had never seen the battlefield, feel both nervous and awestruck. These silent, battle-hardened veterans were the Lord's invincible warriors. They had once been ordinary, lowly commoners like himself. Some had even been slaves brutally exploited by the evil orcs in the wasteland. It was incredible to think about it. "Hi. Is that Benny?" As soon as Benny boarded the ship, he heard someone shout his name from the stern. He quickly turned to look at the cockpit and was surprised to see a familiar face, Jim, a young fisherman from base town who had fled with him from his hometown. Is it Jim? Oh my God. How come you are also in the expeditionary fleet?" Jim came out of the cab with a smile, and led Benny's group of soldiers to the cabin under the deck. "Stay below the deck, otherwise when the ship starts, you will stand on the bull like javelins and you will be frozen into popsicles in a short while." After skillfully arranging the soldiers, Jim turned around and found Benny and explained, "I don't have the ability to join the army. I just applied for a sailor job on the ship, responsible for traveling between Grizzly Fort and Sancho Town, and transporting refugees from the south back." Benny nodded, and then he understood that the ship Jim was on was temporarily requisitioned by the military. "You've learned to sail so quickly? This ironclad ship, without even a sail, is supposedly a magical creation of the Lord?" Jim glanced cautiously and saw that the captain had already ascended to the wheelhouse on the deck. Then, boldly, he led Benny to the power bay directly below it. Pointing to the metal cylinder in the center, covered in strange patterns, he explained quietly, "Don't underestimate me. My job is to infuse the ironclad's power core with magical energy and keep it cool and ventilated." Benny politely hummed, not really understanding a word. "How's the sailor's pay? Is it good?" He knew that Jim's once happy family had been shattered by the plague, and his only survivor was a young sister, whose legs had been crushed by a carriage while fleeing north. Had it not been for the frontier territory, the siblings would have had no chance of survival. Jim deftly wiped the energy core's hull with a cotton cloth, curling his lips as he said, "Of course, it's not as high as you soldiers, but the benefits are pretty good. The captain told me that if I work hard, I'll be promoted to first mate in 3 years, and maybe even captain and own my own ironclad ship." The so-called benefits were actually the free education and medical reimbursement policies currently in place throughout the territory. Anyone who obtained official resident status in the frontier territory was eligible for free literacy education for themselves and their families, and a portion of their medical expenses and medications were reimbursed. The details depended on their employer and the level of medical insurance they purchased. Although a portion of the medical insurance was deducted from their salary, the frontier territory's medical clinics were exceptionally high quality, curing even the often considered incurable diseases of leukemia and cold. For most illnesses and accidents, as long as they didn't die instantly, there was a glimmer of hope. They were highly praised and supported by the people of the territory. Benny chatted with his fellow countrymen for a few more minutes when the captain's resounding voice suddenly rang from the copper pipes in the cabin wall. "Sailor Jim. Preheat the power core. Prepare to start." Jim immediately leaned over to the pipes and shouted, "Sailor Jim, I got it." He immediately dropped the cotton cloth in his hand and retrieved a thick metal canister from a nearby crate. He precisely inserted it into the groove below the power core and pulled a lever. He watched as the magical artifact, with a low hum, emitted a brilliant white glow along its surface. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the cabin temperature making both of them feel a bit hot, Jim rushed back to the pipes. "Captain. Power core preheated, ready to start." He was answered by a dull whistle from the deck above. Even through the cabin, Benny could clearly hear the whistles of all the other ironclad ships around him, almost simultaneously, shattering the morning tranquility of Grizzly Fort dock. The new recruits, braving the chill wind, rushed out of the cabins, lying flat on the cold deck rails, watching the fleet slowly pull away from the dock. Energy core activated. "Speed 1, forward," the captain's voice boomed from the wheelhouse, so loud Benny could hear it from a distance. Almost immediately, the ship jolted violently, then, amid cheers and waves from the dock crowd, steamed down the Ralph River. The ironclad's sharp bow repeatedly clattered against the brittle ice, a sound accompanied by a slight vibration. Benny and the other new recruits nervously grasped the railing, fearing they would be thrown back into the icy river. Wow! It's an ironclad ship indeed, slamming right through the ice. A normal wooden sailboat would have torn apart, exclaimed the experienced new recruits. The middle-aged captain with slightly graying hair leaned out of the wheelhouse and shouted with a smile, "Boys, get in the cabin quickly, we're going to speed up." The closer they got to the center of the river, the thinner the floating ice that had originally frozen the river surface became. The ironclad ship, freed from the shackles of the ice, immediately accelerated like a wild horse. Before Benny could come to his senses, the ship trembled again, and then the speed increased. A biting cold wind like a knife blew in their faces, and the recruits who were still on the deck were so cold that they rolled and crawled back into the cabin. Oh my God! The speed at which this ironclad ship breaks through the ice is almost as fast as a carriage. Chapter 396 Push Operation. Fingidon City lies in the central plains of the Duchy of St. Valen. A fertile tributary of the Ralph River divides the city into two halves. The inner city and military camps lie on the north bank, while to the south, across the river, stretches a vast expanse of fertile farmland. Many branches of Duke Ralph's family also hold fiefs to the south. From the watchtowers on Fingidon City's walls, one can gaze upon the scattered pastures and farms along the southern bank. Unlike other cities within the duchy, Fingidon City has been meticulously managed by generations of Duke Ralph. The old castle fortress has been expanded several times, divided into the inner and outer city. The outer city's walls are not particularly high or sturdy, serving primarily to demarcate the city's boundaries and to collect entrance taxes from the Duke's family. Large-scale fighting hadn't occurred in decades around Fingidon City. The war forts and outposts that once served as warning and defense had long since lost their purpose. The minor nobles and knights, enfeoffed by the first Duke when he founded the kingdom after Grand Duke St. Valen, had long since retired to the countryside, settling into the leisurely lives of wealthy landowners. Fortunately, the current Duke Ralph proved a capable successor. Although the territory's military preparations had declined, the Duke's direct line of the Fingidon Knights remained remarkably powerful. They had accompanied the Duke in countless battles, large and small, their primary exploits being the northern push against the evil orcs who had crossed the Divine Spine Mountains and were invading St. Valen's borders. However, due to the flat terrain of central St. Valen, few cities had been attacked by foreign enemies primarily via waterways. Therefore, the Fingidon City docks, already undefended, were left directly exposed to Harvey's armored fleet. Harvey's fleet sailed south from Grizzly Castle, reaching Sancher Town in just a day. After a brief overnight rest, they immediately set sail westward, sailing along the surging Ralph River at lightning speed. By dusk that same day, they sighted the outlines of Fingidon City's walls. Several towns and docks along the way should have noticed our fleet, but no one would have realized it was an attack on Fingidon City, and no one would have rushed to the city to report it. Wayne, on his second visit to Fingidon City, was more familiar with the local conditions than the others. Even if they did, what good would it do? Unless they used carrier pigeons and frost-winged hawks, by the time they arrived on horseback in the freezing cold, we'd have already blasted down the gates of the Duke's palace. This wasn't Duff's first time fighting south. During the Battle of Sancher Town, he'd witnessed firsthand the incompetence of the southern nobles and knights. Commander Pierce was silent for a moment, then looked up at Vaughn and asked, "Do you think we should directly control the dock, gather our forces and wait until tomorrow morning to launch the attack, or take action directly under cover of darkness?" Vaughn stared at the simple map of Fingidon City in front of him and said in a deep voice, "According to the information provided by our intelligence personnel, the enemy is mainly concentrated near the inner city barracks and the Duke's residence. The outer city walls are guarded by the poorly equipped city defense troops and patrols. They are not to be feared at all." He paused, and pointed the location of the dock with his sturdy fingers. "It will only take half an hour to control the dock. Our fleet should be deployed in this section of the river, using naval guns to directly block the two outer city gates in the southwest, and the main attack direction of the ground forces will be the east gate closest to the inner city area." Before Duke Ralph fled, he took away all his direct bloodline knights and spellcasters. Currently, there are less than 1,000 knights stationed in Fingidon City. Perhaps they can temporarily gather some city defense troops, but the total number will not exceed 2,000. Pierce held two magical bullets, representing his army's targets, and placed them directly at the inner city barracks and the Duke's residence. "Our artillery bombardment can only be carried out at these two locations. The ground forces must advance quickly to minimize casualties on civilians. Wayne asked quietly, what about the vacant North Gate? The special operations team will be ambushed there in advance. This is a deliberate escape loophole for the Duke's family. Otherwise, once we capture Fingigan City, we'll have to spend a lot of time hunting them down inside the city. Pierce was quite experienced in setting traps to capture the defeated nobles. The people of the Southern Territory didn't have magical ID cards like the Frontier Territory did, and simply identifying and verifying the identities of the defeated nobles was a real hassle. A terrifying roar startled Hansen, the city defense captain, so much so that he fell from his chair. Before he could get up and rush out of the house to investigate, a series of rumbling sounds, accompanied by the shaking of the ground and the building, nearly staggered him again. What happened? Hansen grabbed the guard's collar as he saw him rush in, his face covered in blood. Could it be that one of those spellcasters in the city accidentally cast a spell into our city guard barracks? The guard, bewildered and terrified, trembled. No. I don't know, sir. Something strange fell from the sky, and we couldn't see what it was. Not only the barracks, but also the city gate and the wall were blown to pieces. The guard standing nearby, Hansen pushed the guard aside, snatched his sword from the wall, and ran straight out of the barracks. Once outside, he found the entire city guard camp, built along the city wall, engulfed in flames. Not far away, the heavy wooden gate had been torn apart, tilting and falling like two rags. Several unfortunate guards were trapped, screaming for help. Several breaches had also appeared in the wall above. Fortunately, it was cold, and there were no guards patrolling the walls for long periods of time, so there were no casualties. What the hell is going on? Who dares to attack the city guards? Hansen felt extremely anxious, but fortunately he had some brains. He quickly called the guard and ordered, hurry to the knight's base in the inner city and ask them for help. There may be enemies sneaking in to create chaos in the city. The guard had just mounted his horse and galloped towards the inner city when a group of city guards, looking even more miserable, ran towards Hansen crying, "Boss. This is bad. It's the enemies from Sancha Town." What? Sancha Town? Hansen felt his heart sink. They came by boat? Why didn't we receive a warning from the dock? It was too late. They stopped the boat a long way away. We didn't even see who was coming before the whole dock suddenly exploded with a bang. The other side must have a spellcaster on the boat to attack us. Hansen immediately thought of the terrible rumor about the fleet full of elite knights sent by the Duke to Sancha Town, and how no one returned to Fingigan City in the end. The border lord who openly opposed the entire principality of St. Valen actually came to their door so brazenly. And they didn't even receive any news or warning. How did the other party do it? Before he could think it through, there were several more whistling sounds above his head, and the city defense soldiers almost subconsciously lay on the ground to avoid them. This time Hansen finally figured out where the attack came from. The huge roar coming from the direction of the dock could not be completely covered by the tragic movement of people and horses falling to the ground in the camp at this moment. It's the dock. The enemy is attacking us at the dock. God! How did they manage to attack the city gate from such a distance? These horrible things that flew from the sky and exploded directly in the city, what kind of weird magic weapons are they? Chapter 397 Street Fight. Benny leaned against the makeshift shelter and clearly heard footsteps coming from the street corner ahead. The rubbing of metal armor. It was a knight, but he was not riding a war horse. He raised the magic gun in his hand and aimed it at the position where the enemy would appear not far away. This was the only way for the Fingigan Knights to get from their base to the Duke's palace. After they captured the outer city, they directly split into two groups and blocked the enemy's possible reinforcements in different areas of the inner city. From the moment they arrived at Fingigan City on the ironclad ship, the siege and assault progressed extremely quickly. The battle had only lasted for less than an hour and a half. The Fingigan City docks, the outer city, and the city guard base had all fallen under the control of the Northern Army. Benny's squad was tasked with intercepting the Fingigan Knights, who were attempting to reinforce the Duke's palace. He had never imagined he'd be able to personally kill an enemy so soon, a fully armed, legitimate knight at that. But seeing the man, struck squarely in the chest by his bullet, fall face down to the ground, his mind lost all ability to think. He could only numbly repeat the rigid motion of raising his rifle and firing, following his squad leader's command. Don't be distracted. They're coming again. Suddenly, a gun barrel protruded from his side. Benny glanced over and saw it was his squad leader, Newman. I heard their movements. These guys tried to sneak across our blockade. Benny looked focused, but spoke weakly. It's too dark, I can't see how many enemies there are. Newman patted the recruit on the shoulder, half teasingly and half comfortingly said, logically speaking, this should not be the first time you have killed someone, of course, if in your mind, the evil orcs are not considered people at all. Benny shrank his neck and dared not argue for himself. During the recruit's actual combat training, he did accidentally shoot and hide an evil orc who almost rushed to the trench, but when cleaning the battlefield afterwards, he didn't dare to get close to the corpses. He hid behind and vomited for an unknown period of time. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Captain, the injured comrades sent to the rear, they'll all survive, right? The captain narrowed his eyes, his tone hardening. Perhaps. No one can guarantee 100% survival in war. You have to do your best to avoid making as few mistakes as possible, so as not to endanger yourself and your comrades. Benny nodded. From his initial nervous panic to his current numbness and bewilderment, he finally understood the meaning of Commander Wayne's words during recruit training. Only by experiencing true life and death combat can one become a qualified soldier. Attention! They're coming, Captain Newman suddenly shouted, decisively pulling the trigger. In the flash of fire from the magic bullets colliding with enemy armor, the soldiers could clearly see the enemies rushing out from the corner of the street in the darkness. 7 or 8 men, holding huge steel shields horizontally, slowly advancing towards them. One of the shields had a cracked corner, likely the result of the captain's recent shot. Benny could even see the terrified face of the young knight behind the broken shield. They now knew clearly that even the strongest shields of fine steel could not withstand the magical spears wielded by the Northern Army. Yet, they resolutely followed orders, fearlessly advancing with their shields held high. The leader's shot signaled the direction for the rest of the soldiers, and Benny immediately aimed his rifle at a shield-hiding enemy and opened fire decisively. The bullet struck the shield, piercing through unimpeded. The knight behind the shield let out a scream and fell to the ground with a thud. Enemies on either side quickly closed in, filling the gap left by the fallen knight. More and more soldiers opened fire, single-handedly picking off these desperate shield-bearers. In the dark, empty streets, the only sounds were the rhythmic footsteps of the enemy, their slightly fearful gasps, the thuds of bullets hitting the ground, and, amidst the silence, the relentless crackle of Northern Army gunfire. Are they just going to rush forward like this, dying in vain? Team leader Newman began to sense something was amiss. The frontline shield bearers had already fallen, but men kept coming up from behind, carrying their battered shields. Who were they desperately shielding? Before he could form an answer, the dwindling number of shield bearers finally pushed their way to within 200 meters of the Northern Army's firing position. Then, dropping their massive shields, they quickly dispersed to the sides, revealing a dark mass of shadows behind them. It's the Fingidu Knight. Benny's eyes widened in surprise. He realized that the hooves of the enemy's horses were bound with thick cotton cloth, muffling the clatter of their hooves as they galloped. Silently, they advanced, shielded by the towering shields in front of them, to within striking distance. Clang! Swords were drawn in unison, and the leading black-clad, silver-armored knight roared, "For the Duke! For Fingidun City! Charge with me!" The sturdy, well-trained war horses, needing no pre-trot to gather strength, instantly leapt to life under the skillful control of their knights, charging like a catapult towards the Northern Army's firing position. Volley! Volley! Empty your magazines, several Northern Army team leaders and captains shouted in unison, rising from their cover and recklessly firing at the knights ahead. Frightened by the mass charge, Benny froze. Even after his ammunition ran out, he held the trigger firmly, completely forgetting the proper reload. Amidst the hail of bullets and fire, he could faintly make out the steam rising from the enemy's horses and the cold gleam of their metal armor. The foremost knight hurled his spear with a fierce thrust. A flash of silver light flashed, and with a thud, it pierced the shoulder of a new recruit beside Benny, pinning him to the ground with such force. Blood gushed from the soldier's shoulder wound, and crimson foam oozed from his mouth and nose as he screamed in agony. Frightened, Benny could no longer maintain his half-crouched shooting stance and sank to the ground, his teeth chattering. A veteran soldier quickly emptied his magazine, slung his rifle over his back, and lunged forward in 2 quick steps. With his bare hands, he broke the soldier's spear shaft, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him backwards. Over 100 meters away, the Fingidun Knight's reckless charge closed the gap in an instant. More and more soldiers, whose magazines were empty but who hadn't had time to reload, We're struck by enemy spears. The enemy wants to trade our lives. They're trying to break the encirclement. Retreat. Retreat. Get to the second line. Wounded. Drag them away. Benny felt his belt tighten, and before he could react, team leader Newman grabbed him by the waist and led him back, stumbling. The only thing he remembered was not to drop his gun. I'm not going to die here. Benny felt a flicker of fear in his heart, but Newman immediately stepped on his back and pinned him to the ground. Then he heard a burst of continuous, uninterrupted gunfire from the second line behind him. The next second, the enemy rushed in, and a series of sounds of shattering flesh and breaking bones, and the piercing sound of armor cracking, so sharp it made people's teeth ache. Bullets rained down on Benny's head, carrying a strong airflow, and the rich smell of blood filled his face. The intense firing lasted less than a minute. When Benny was pulled from the ground by his team leader, he was shocked to find that the enemy who had just been about to cross the first line had disappeared. All that lay before him was a bloody, hellish scene. Countless limbs and limbs of men and horses lay scattered on the ground. Flesh and blood lay thick and thick, covering the backs of their feet. Not even a single body of the dead could be pieced together. Team leader Newman stepped over the sandbag shelter and snatched up a relatively intact steel sword from the pile of flesh and blood. He shook the flesh off with a grim smile. Benny felt something roiling in his stomach. He doubled over and retched several times, but found nothing but acid. You bastards of the machine gun squad, if you had been half a minute later, we would have been facing these damn knights head-on, a veteran captain shouted. Chapter 398 A Great Victory. A flash of lightning flashed, followed by the dull thud of a body falling to the ground. The enemy was cleaved in two by the alchemical blade at the shoulder, his armor and shield offering no resistance. He didn't even see the terrifying alien's attack. As the bisected body fell, spurting blood, the remaining enemies blocking the gap in the gate couldn't help but express fear and despair. Dave grinned, shaking the sticky blood from his blade. He took a step forward and slashed across, sending another head, eyes wide open, soaring into the air. He raised his blade again, slicing open the remaining two before they could offer any resistance. Their chests and abdomens were ripped open, their hot organs and blood splattering across the ground. Suddenly, the sound of a blade piercing the air echoed overhead. Dave twisted and dodged a crossbow bolt fired from the darkness above. Behind him, Wayne, without even looking up, fired his rifle. A muffled groan was heard from above, followed by silence. "Where's your gun?" Wayne complained, frowning. "The Duke's castle is complex, beware of surprise attacks." Dave curled his lips and said nonchalantly, "Fireworks aren't practical indoors, and I prefer the exhilarating feeling of hitting flesh with every blow." A team of bloodline warriors, led by Dave and Wayne, completely routed the enemy entrenched at the castle's side entrance in less than a few minutes. The Duke's personal guards, who had originally planned to defend the castle, awaiting reinforcements from the inner city's Fingian knights, had never encountered such a formidable foe. From the castle walls, they engaged the enemy with crossbows and longbows, only to be swiftly targeted and killed by ranged weapons whose source was impossible to discern. Terrified, they never dared to venture out from the walls or windows again. The enemies who stormed into the castle were even more formidable. They were all powerful bloodline warriors of the mid-level or higher rank, more swift and agile than even ferocious monsters. No ordinary guard could survive their long swords, unable to evade or withstand them. They could only fight and retreat into the underground fortifications. Tisk. They've lowered the stone door in the bunker. Dave narrowed his eyes and spat with a hint of regret. Vaughn slowly walked from outside the castle to the entrance of the Duke's bunker, which was surrounded by the bloodline warriors. He frowned and said, "The bunker must have an emergency passage leading out. I wonder if it leads directly out of the city or is located in Fingian City." He was accompanied by a man who was not dressed like a soldier at all. He chuckled and said, "Don't worry about the Duke's family members escaping. Our people have infiltrated the Duke's servants. We just need to wait for news and carry out the arrests." Vaughn knew that the Lord and Lordess Dallin had arranged for a number of secret police to infiltrate Fingian City long ago. He had never expected that they would even infiltrate the Duke's mansion. It was truly a stealthy operation. The Duke's mansion was illuminated by countless bonfires and torches. A battalion of the Northern Army, with more than 500 soldiers, surrounded it tightly. It was already midnight. The bombardment from the outer city docks had long ceased, leaving only sporadic fighting in a few inner city alleys. Soldiers from other battalions, operating in small groups, were hunting down and rounding up Duke Ralph's remaining knights and scattered personal guards. The vassal nobles and offshoots of the Duke's family, who had long resided in Fingigan City, had long been bundled out of their respective mansions and brought to the Duke's residence. With magic spears pointed at their backs, they, with pale faces, shouted out pleas for surrender to the remaining enemies still stubbornly holding on to the castle's upper floors. "They're just stubborn diehards. Just set them on fire," Dave grumbled impatiently. Duke Ralph had already fled to Jinhu City, and it seemed unnecessary to persuade these relatives, whom he had left behind as a cover, to surrender. The secret police officer beside Vaughn waved his hands repeatedly. "That won't do. The Duke's family treasury is hidden underground, and the castle also contains a vast collection of gold, silver, and antiques. These are all spoils of war for the Lord, and not a single one of them can be wasted." Vaughn nodded in agreement. This was also the reason he hadn't ordered a violent attack, fearing that the Duke's remnants, with no way out, would, in desperation, set themselves on fire before they could. Aside from the outer walls and the ground floor foundation, which were stone, the rest of the Duke's palace was constructed of flammable wood. If a fire did start, it would be difficult to put out. Sir, I really tried my best," a portly, pale nobleman, trembling as he was led before the officers, pleaded bitterly. They refused to surrender. I just tried to persuade them, and then a few crossbows were fired from upstairs. We almost, Captain, let's charge with the bloodline warriors." Wayne frowned as he gazed at the steep, spiraling staircase and advised Vaughn in a deep voice. "Where's Commander Pierce?" Vaughn turned to his personal guard and asked. After the commander learned that we had eliminated the main force of the most troublesome Fingigan knights, he returned to the dock base. He said that the remaining finishing work should be completed by ourselves. The secret police officer who had been standing nearby burst out laughing. "It seems that the commander is using actual combat to test the decision-making ability of the superiors," Vaughn sighed and ordered Dave and Wayne, who were eager to try. "Then let's force the attack. You go and make the arrangements." At this moment, the small group of direct descendants of the Ralph family who had pulled down the stone gate of the bunker, completely cutting off the passage between the Duke's mansion and the underground, were also caught in a dilemma and hopeless situation. "Your Excellency Baron, don't count on reinforcements anymore." Ralph's family steward looked embarrassed and kept urging Baron Simone, Duke Ralph's brother who was in charge of guarding the Duke's palace. When the Duke left, he took away all the spellcaster consultants and bloodline knights. He didn't leave us any strength to resist. This is completely disregarding our lives." Baron Simone leaned on the sword in his hand, pacing back and forth anxiously. Finally, he couldn't help but curse. "Damn Lewis, let him retreat into the bunker with us," but he insisted on continuing to resist with the remaining guards. "Now, except for retreating to the top of the castle, I'm afraid there is no possibility of escape." When the enemy surrounded the Duke's palace, seeing that they could not resist at all, Simone and Lewis, the Duke's chief knight, had obvious differences. One decisively decided to retreat into the bunker, lower the stone door, and then escape with his relatives through the secret passage. The chief knight, however, firmly opposed fleeing without a fight. He insisted on leading his loyal guards to fight to the death, pledging loyalty to Duke Ralph, who had long since abandoned them. "Of course we must evacuate as soon as possible." The Baron sheathed his sword, gritting his teeth. "The secret passage leads directly outside the city. We have plenty of time to escape safely. Open the family treasury in the bunker immediately. Take only the gold and jewels, and burn the rest. Humph. Leave no loot for the enemy." If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399 Finishing Work. At dawn, Fingigan City showed no sign of life. All the citizens knew of the invasion, but as long as they stayed inside their homes, the insurgents wouldn't burst into their homes and plunder. The sight of noble lords attacking and plundering each other was commonplace for the ordinary, impoverished people of this land. Even if the army rampaged through the city, it would be little more than looting, burning, and indulging in violence, something they could tolerate and pass over. After all, massacres had always been the province of foreign invaders. Harvey, controlling a spirit puppet, entered the devastated ducal mansion. Vaughn and the other northern officers on the expedition had already knelt in the hall to greet him. In fact, Even before the army set out, Harvey had instructed Pierce to load the puppet onto the ironclad ship, so he could be awakened immediately after the battle. It wasn't the first time anyone present had witnessed a lord's use of his Avidar puppet. Though they saw the frail, dark-eyed, unfamiliar face, they could still manage to hypnotize themselves by silently repeating, "This is the Lord." The bodies of the fallen had been removed from the castle, but the stains and stench of blood lingered thickly. Broken furnishings, half carried away, and broken weapons carelessly discarded lay scattered about. Harvey could instantly and vividly imagine his own bloodline warriors storming the castle, one-sidedly crushing the stubborn enemy. "Everyone, get up." Harvey waved his hand and walked over to the high-backed chair that originally belonged to Duke Ralph and sat down. "You did a great job. You completed this mission more cleanly and efficiently than I originally expected." The only brown-haired man among the subordinates who was not in military uniform stood up and knelt on one knee to salute Harvey. "My lord, I am the secret police responsible for intelligence work in Fingigan City. Please call me codename 088. Harvey narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I know you. It was you who cooperated with the intelligence police in Jinhu City and discovered the secret of Duke Ralph's escape from Fingigan City, which led to our successful raid on his lair this time. You did a great job." Codename 088 patted his chest and continued, "Our colleagues lurking in the Duke's mansion, with the cooperation of the Special Operations Team, have just captured all of the Duke's relatives who fled out of the city through the secret passage, and also confiscated some of the gold they hurriedly carried with them. It was pure gold, worth tens of thousands of pounds, and of exceptional quality. Yet, it comprised less than a fifth of the family treasury within the Duke's bunker. Had the evacuation not been so hasty, they wouldn't have taken so little. Oh? Duke Ralph, when he fled on his own, didn't even take his vast fortune, accumulated over generations." This surprised Harvey. The Duke likely hadn't anticipated his family's demise so quickly. "I thought they'd burn down whatever they couldn't take away." Codename 088 smiled and replied, "They had that in mind, but unfortunately, it was one of our men who was assigned to cover the rearguard action. The antiques and chests of coins were left intact." Harvey nodded, no longer dwelling on the spoils. After all, he was no longer as financially strapped as he had been before. Furthermore, the wealth seized from a founding duke was a mere drop in the bucket for his vast domain. With a population exceeding 50,000. As long as these quickly convertible gains from war could largely offset the war's costs, both Harvey himself and the territory's municipal finance department would likely be satisfied. Using war to support war is always the most effective strategy for external expansion. Harvey casually inquired about the aftermath of scattered battles across the city, then coughed softly and tapped his fingers on the armrest of an intricately carved chair. The hall immediately fell silent. From the soldiers leaning against the wall, armed, on guard, to the officers gathered around Harvey, everyone looked intently at their lord. Three things. First, the secret police, in coordination with the military, must immediately take over Fingigan City's urban management, appease the people, and investigate any remaining Duke's culprits. Second, 2 battalions of soldiers will remain to temporarily oversee Fingigan City's garrison and defense. The military will independently discuss and arrange future rotations. In any case, I only require that this city maintain a military presence of at least 1,000 men. Fingigan City, after all, is located in the central part of the principality, boasting flat terrain and excellent transportation links. It offers convenient access to the rest of the principality by river or land. Crucially, it's less than 7 days' journey from the royal capital to the west, Jinhu City. Barely a fortuitous outcome, the Grand Duke and Grand Duke Ralph, both in Jinhu City, should receive news of Fingigan City's fall within 5 days. Regardless of when they launch a counterattack, Harvey must leave sufficient forces in Fingigan City to defend it. He paused, then raised his index finger. One last thing. For all the captured remnants of the Duke in the city, as well as those vassal nobles, I will establish a tribunal to accept public reports and publicly judge their crimes. It was undeniable that Duke Ralph, using the Grand Duke's summons, had proactively provoked disputes among the lords of the fiefdoms, leading to widespread civil unrest and widespread suffering within the duchy. However, what fueled the public's indignation and hatred was his indulgence in his vassal nobles, arbitrarily increasing taxes and forcing the people into forced labor. His knights and mercenaries further exploited the people, plundering and abusing the people of the surrounding fiefdoms. We must make the people of Fingigan City understand that the Northern Army is not invaders, much less an enemy of the people here. We, like them, are resistors against the tyranny of the Duke and the nobles. And those greedy nobles who have committed serious crimes will be punished. We obey the Lord's orders. Pierce led the officers in kneeling once more, and the other soldiers in the hall followed suit, kneeling excitedly and saluting Harvey. After making general arrangements for the follow-up, Harvey left Pierce and Secret Officer 088 alone. What are our casualties? We didn't suffer any during the capture of the outer city. It was mainly the 2nd Battalion, tasked with intercepting the Fingal Knights' reinforcements to the Duke's palace in the streets. The enemy's reckless charge resulted in approximately 20 soldiers killed on the spot. In fact, a considerable number of soldiers were seriously injured, but thanks to the advanced military medical technology, most of the wounded did not have to worry about their injuries worsening. Those with severe limb damage could even receive metal prosthetics, and recovery was only a matter of time. Harvey nodded, but didn't reprimand. Commanding 1,500 soldiers to assault a city of over 10,000, keeping the casualties to double digits was already a significant feat. This was primarily due to the relatively low intensity of mortal warfare in this era. Aside from supernatural weapons like spellcasters, there weren't many direct and effective means of inflicting mass casualties, unless, in the worst case of bad luck, an uncontrollable infectious disease broke out among the troops. Secret Police Officer 088 leaned over and whispered, "My lord, what should we do with the Duke's relatives we've captured? Should we temporarily imprison them to serve as a deterrent should Duke Ralph launch a counterattack?" Harvey chuckled and waved his hand. "No need. It's just a power-grabbing tactic among nobles. Imprison them with the rest of the nobility, subject them to public denunciations and revelations, and let them face justice." Chapter 400 Sweeping the Surroundings. Compared to the elite knights and city defenders of the Ralph family in Fingal City, the vassal nobles scattered across the city's surrounding fiefdoms were a formidable opponent. Most of the nobles and small landowners could not mount a single effective resistance, quickly being routed by a single volley in a direct engagement. The Northern Army soldiers tasked with clearing the city didn't even need to change magazines during a single engagement, as if they were simply practicing target practice in the frontier camp. The Northern Army, operating in small groups, rapidly cleared the settlements of the smaller nobles surrounding Fingal City, encountering little resistance. The sweep finally slowed down after they retreated to Duke Ralph's hunting fort on Fingal Ridge. Equipped only with magical rifles and machine guns, the soldiers encountered unexpected challenges. "Isn't this a tortoise shell built of stones?" Team leader Newman spat in exasperation, gazing at the sturdy stone fortress nestled against the cliff. "They even built a man-made moat." Captain Chiron, a veteran of the pioneering army and far more experienced than any of the junior officers present, remained silent and stern, unable to devise a quick solution to this stone shell. When we approached the fortress for a tentative attack, the enemy fired a large number of crossbows at us. Many soldiers were wounded. This expedition had no alchemical vehicles for the soldiers. Most of the cleanup teams leaving the city relied on confiscated carriages, and the mobile medical teams lingering nearby would take the better part of a day to arrive. Chiron reasoned that a reckless frontal assault was no longer feasible, as any seriously injured soldiers would risk dying before they could receive medical treatment. "Captain, this stone fort is separated by a moat, and the gates are blocked by boulders and logs. The sniper team killed a few of the enemies who showed themselves on the walls, and they're completely afraid to show their bodies. They can only fight us like this. If time was of the essence, the Northern Army could certainly set up camp and surround them, waiting for the stubborn enemies inside the stone fort to run out of food and ammunition, and then they would naturally collapse. But the problem is that the commander only gave them 3 days, no time to waste with these cowards. We can only ask the artillery battalion for help," Newman muttered softly. "Just a few shells at the gates. It won't take much effort, and they'll be scared into surrendering on the spot." Chiron's face froze, and he remembered that when he and several team leaders had left the city to clear the city, they had mocked the artillery battalion's short legs and said they couldn't keep up with the infantry while pushing heavy cannons. Would asking them for help now be self-defeating? Thinking of this, he spat in anger and cursed, "Damn it, which bastard from the Ralph family built this fort?" The intelligence officer accompanying the army came over and replied, "Baron Frost Eagle, Duke Ralph's nephew, and the former chief of the Fingal Knights. He is considered the Duke's direct descendant, but because he was seriously injured in a battle a few years ago, he can no longer serve the Duke, and was subsequently abandoned and sent to garrison in a hunting fort on the edge of the fiefdom. The secret police trained by Harvey are still quite active in Fingal City. and they can only hear about the situation around the Duke's fiefdom. No one expected that Baron Frost Eagle would build this deserted hunting fort as strong as a war fortress. Not only did he take advantage of the terrain advantage of being built on the mountain, but he also diverted streams from the mountains to pour into a man-made canal more than 5 meters wide, forming a semicircular small moat. The entire fortress had only one entrance and exit. To enter, one had to cross the moat and lower the drawbridge. However, even the main entrance to the drawbridge was piled with boulders and massive logs by the enemy, clearly determined to hold their ground. According to information gathered by the secret police, Duke Ralph had fled to the capital without a single Frostthawk knight, indicating that the enemy within the fortress was well equipped and would be a formidable opponent without siege weapons. Notify the artillery battalion and send a crew for support, Captain Kyron sighed, resignedly ordering the messenger. It will take more than half a day for them to arrive, so we'll just stay here and set up camp. As the sun set over the hilltops, bright bonfires blazed outside the tents of the Northern Army. Even from a distance, the inhabitants of the fortress could see the soldiers, carrying strange spears, patrolling the perimeter with unwavering vigilance. A fully armored knight walked down from the battlements of the city wall with heavy steps and hurried into the dark and cramped meeting hall in the mountain fortress. Your Excellency Baron, it seems that the enemy intends to besiege the city and want to starve us to death. Baron Frost Eagle, with disheveled gray hair and beard, sat on a chair and frowned. Where are the spies we sent out? Has Fingigan City really been breached? My uncle, the Duke, has he really abandoned his fiefdom and fled to the royal capital a long time ago? The young knight sneered with some disgust. The Duke was frightened by the horrific assassination method. He even ignored his territory and family and only thought about how to save his own life. He paused, and whispered tentatively, Father, ever since you angered the Duke by opposing his large-scale conscription of laborers during the spring plowing season, the major families in Fingigan City have become more and more ostracizing and making things difficult for us. Now it's even more so. There is no need for us to be loyal to him anymore. Ralph is not worth it. Before the young knight could finish his words, Baron Frost Eagle slapped the armrest of his chair and scolded, How could such words that tarnish the honor of a knight and violate his oath come out of the mouth of my own son? If I hear one more, I will personally throw your sword and armor into the ditch. The captain of the Baron's personal guard came over and said, The spy we sent out yesterday has returned. He said that he saw with his own eyes that the enemy possessed a rumbling magic weapon that could directly attack the defenders in Fingigan City from a distance of hundreds of meters. That thing seemed to be an alchemical artifact made of some kind of dragon flame powder, which blew up the entire outer city gate. The wizard lord of Grizzly Castle, of course he would possess the same magical creations as the Federation. They have long been plotting to rebel against His Majesty the Grand Duke. The raid on Fingigan City was probably just to cooperate with the spellcasters of Danius. The young knight was stunned for a moment, then hesitantly explained, Father, it was Duke Ralph who first sent troops to Grizzle Castle, harassing the people and looting villages and towns. Frostflower County is said to have suffered the most from the Duke's army, and refugees are flocking to Grizzle Castle in droves. Baron Frostthawk opened his mouth, but this indisputable fact stifled his words, and he could only turn his head away awkwardly. The captain of the guards conveniently changed the subject, saying, I'll check the weapons and food supplies in the vault. Since they want to stalemate, before he could finish his words, a deafening explosion erupted from outside. Rumbling thunder seemed to roll across the sky, sending dust cascading from the stone ceiling of the meeting hall. The three men stumbled out of the hall, only to find the once heavy fortress gate completely shattered. Several soldiers guarding it lay on the ground in a bloody mess, dead on the spot. Baron Frostthawk felt a surge of despair. The enemy used that terrifying alchemical weapon to deal with us. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.